Chapter 289. Meng Haizhou and the others thought that Li Yuan was taking advantage of this opportunity to make things difficult for Jun Moxie, so they started to jeer. But they didn't know that Li Yuan was speaking from the bottom of her heart. Young Master Yuan must be joking. Kong Ling Yang's complexion darkened. He was somewhat displeased. Young Master Jun may have other achievements in other areas. But you're not famous in the way of poetry. This is, someone snickered. Although Master Kong's words were very vague, everyone could hear that Jun Moxie's achievements in other areas were nothing more than brothels, running dogs, fighting cocks, bullying men and women, and other despicable things. As for other areas, what achievements could this kid have? Everyone praised in their hearts. Old Master Kong is indeed Old Master Kong. He's so refined even when mocking people. Master Kong, you don't need to worry. If your disciple can't even win a debate with Jun Moxie, why would he want to compete with young Master Yuan? Meng Haizhou replied with a faint smile. His words had greatly provoked Master Kong. Kong Ling Yang was speechless. If my disciple, whom I've nurtured with painstaking effort, can't compare with that debauchee, then I'll have to find a way to commit suicide. He didn't say anything else. He waved his hand, and designated a disciple to fight. Then, he sullenly sat down. This student is Han Zhidong. I would like to ask for advice from young Master Jun. A young man stood up with a smile. He clasped his hands in front of him from afar. Then, he raised his head, and a trace of disdain flashed in his eyes. Well, there's no need to ask for advice. I'll teach you a few moves when I have the time. I guarantee that you'll be able to move unhindered in the Spirit Fog Lake. How can I demonstrate the mysteries of these moves in public? Even if you don't mind, I do. Jun Moxie naturally saw the disdain in his eyes. He chuckled, winked, and laughed. Then, he put a shameless hat on his disciple's head. I've always been clean and pure. I've never gone to a place like the Spirit Fog Lake. Han Zhidong's voice was a little cold, and he felt a burst of contempt in his heart. He is indeed a big scum. I asked him for some knowledge, and he actually talked about brothels. Do you also know that this is a public place? What a disgrace. You haven't been to the Spirit Fog Lake. Where are you going? Jun Moxie felt disgusted in his heart. Are you guys not done yet? Swinging his legs, he leisurely said, Oh, that's right, this young master was negligent. Judging from gifted scholar Han's shabby attire, I presume he can't afford to go to that kind of place. It seems that if there's a need, he can only wield a long spear in his hand and devise a strategy in his heart. In his small room, he can move about freely and majestically, exterminating millions upon millions of soldiers and horses with one spear. What kind of words were those? Han Zhidong's fair and handsome face suddenly turned red as if he had been injected with chicken blood. His neck also became thicker in a split second. Jun Dashao's choice of words was very elegant. Moreover, it was also very imposing. Many people in the crowd stared blankly for a moment. They carefully thought about it for a while, and finally understood what he meant. They couldn't help but giggle. This brat is really too bad. For a moment, the entire hall was filled with the kind of vulgar laughter that belonged to men. It could only be understood, but it couldn't be expressed in words. Only Princess Raimu, Dugu Xiaoyi, Han Yan Meng, and the other talented young ladies stared with astonished eyes. They looked from one to the other in confusion. They faintly felt that this wasn't a good thing. However, they couldn't figure out what was so bad about it. Listening to Jun Moxie's words, it seemed as if he was describing an awe-inspiring general. But, why was it so strange? Several old men winked at each other. Only a few of them were laughing out loud without the slightest scruple. They were slapping the table, slapping their thighs, and laughing so hard that their eyebrows couldn't even be seen. Duge Zonghang slapped Tang Wanli's shoulder. Tang Wanli's body was trembling with laughter. Duge Zongheng chuckled and said, Old Tang, I suddenly remembered the time when we had just entered the army. It was the eve of the fierce battle on Mount Celestial Wolf. Old June was a squad leader. That night, Old Tang, you were so awe-inspiring. We all saw it. Tang Wanli's face turned red as he jumped up. He no longer cared about his fear of Duge Zonghang. He fiercely opened his arms and placed them on Duge Zonghang's thick neck. Then, he growled in a low voice, "You old bastard. If you dare to say another word." Duge Zonghang coughed repeatedly. He was laughing and begging for mercy at the same time. Several old men put their thumbs up to Tang Wanli's nose. So, everyone heard it, Old Master Tang's face turned red. He angrily stood up and was about to leave. But, he was held down by several old men. They smiled and persuaded him to stay. Duge Xiaoyi saw that her 7 brothers were tightly grinning. Their dark faces looked like they were overjoyed. Their shoulders were trembling. It seemed that they were very funny. So, she couldn't help but ask, "What did he say? Is it really that funny?" The 7 brothers looked at each other in dismay. They stared blankly for a moment. Then, they shook their heads in unison, "It's not funny." "How is it funny?" "It's not funny at all." Duge Xiaoyi snorted. She angrily turned her head. She suddenly felt that these men, including her brothers and June Moxie, were very loathsome. "I can't even get an answer today. I'm so angry." She secretly thought over what June Moxie had said and firmly remembered it in her heart. She thought to herself, "Don't say it if you don't want to say it. When I go home and ask my mother." I don't believe that she really doesn't know. Han Zhidong took a deep breath. He knew that he wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand if he continued to bicker with this debauchee. He said, "His Majesty is gracious enough to bestow this golden scholarly talent banquet today. This humble student is ashamed that I was allowed to follow my esteemed teacher here. When I arrived, I saw the golden chrysanthemum and cinnamon osmanthus in full bloom in the imperial garden. I came across a couplet by chance. May young Master June enlighten me." She didn't wait for June Moxie's response before reciting, "The imperial garden, the fragrance of chrysanthemum, the fragrance of orchid, the fragrance of osmanthus, the fragrance of flowers, the fragrance of flowers, the fragrance of heavenly fragrance, the fragrance of 1,000 miles, the fragrance of 1,000 miles." As soon as this couplet came out, everyone fell into deep thought. This couplet seemed simple, but it wasn't simple at all. This was especially true for the last sentence. The 2 words, Tian Xiang, were embedded in it. It was a metaphorical blessing for the Tian Xiang Empire. However, this couplet didn't leave a single trace. It could be said that this was an expert. Everyone was racking their brains, trying to come up with this couplet in front of everyone. They wanted to show off their talents in front of His Majesty. As for June Moxie, no one had high hopes for him. Wouldn't it be a joke to ask him to come up with such a difficult and profound couplet? Even in his next life, he wouldn't be able to come up with a couplet. Young Master June, this humble student's talent is shallow. I can barely come up with such a shallow couplet. I wonder if it would be able to enter young Master June's eyes? Han Zhidong chuckled as he looked at June Moxie humbly. His expression was very sincere. "I hope that young Master June will not be stingy in giving me some pointers." If he hadn't said these words, and had waited until June Moxie couldn't come up with the couplet and made a fool of himself, everyone would have looked up to him while looking down on June Moxie. He believed that this couplet would have left a special impression in the hearts of all the big shots. After all, coming up with such a difficult couplet on the spot was also an extraordinary talent. However, these words of his made all the big shots sigh in their hearts. This gifted scholar was so unforgiving and arrogant. His temperament had long since deteriorated. Moreover, you've been nurtured by the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute for many years. Do you think that you should be proud of making things difficult for a debauchee in a couplet? This so-called gifted scholar's lifetime achievements won't be high. Even if he had the opportunity to climb up, the big shots wouldn't allow someone with such a temperament to rise to power. Who could guarantee that this guy wouldn't deal with them after he gained power? Therefore, Han Jidong didn't know that he had declared the end of his political career because he had spoken a few words. He was still feeling complacent at this moment. Jun Moxie wrinkled his brows. I can plagiarize a poem if it was an impromptu one. But, I can't plagiarize this kind of impromptu couplet even if I want to. How come the first match is a *T couplet? Can't we compete with something else? This is really fucking awesome. Kong Lingyang narrowed his eyes. He seemed very proud of himself. Young Master Jun, there's no harm in saying it if you can't come up with a couplet. Hee, this isn't a shameful matter for young master, everyone chuckled. This old man is unforgiving. Moreover, he's adhering to his usual habit of cursing people without using any profanity. It seems that he's going to continue cursing. Jun Moxie's anger surged. He suddenly steeled his heart and said in a loud voice, what's so difficult about this? Isn't it just a *T couplet? See how this elder brother will match it for you. I'll trample the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute by myself. Boos rang out from all directions. This guy really dares to speak. He's only a little bit capable, but he dares to spout such crazy words. Isn't he afraid that the wind will cut his tongue? It seems that this kid is going to be ruthlessly abused by the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute today. Only Li Yuran and Jun Zhantian's pupils shrank. Li Yuran believed in his ability. Moreover, Li Yuran had also tried to come up with the couplet. But, she felt that it wasn't a good match. However, Jun Moxie was speaking such wild words at this moment. She couldn't help but think in her heart, is he really stronger than me? Grandpa Jun became somewhat anxious. This little bastard. Didn't I tell you to hide your abilities? Why are you showing off your abilities now? Kong Lingyang sneered and said, young Master Jun is truly confident. How about this? If young Master Jun can come up with the answer within the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, then my Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute will willingly concede defeat. But, if you can't come up with the answer, then I ask young Master Jun to mediate with young Master Tang, and return my poor disciple to me. How about it? The disciple he was talking about was naturally the underwear washing scholar Zhao Qingsong, who had been abused by Tang Yuan. However, when Tang Yuan had been expelled from the family, Zhao Qingsong had already been beaten to death with a stick for fear of leaving behind a scourge. How could he be found? Even if he were to summon his soul from the netherworld, his bones would have long since rotted by now, no problem. Jun Moxie raised his head and took charge of the matter. If I can't come up with the answer, then I'll return your disciple's corpse to you. You only want a disciple. You didn't say whether he's dead or alive. I don't mind, however, if I come up with the answer, then you must also come up with the answer. If you can't come up with the answer, then your Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute will never speak of this couplet again in front of this young master. How about it? Jun Moxie gave a strange smile. Chapter 290. It's a deal. Kong Lingyang didn't pay any attention to him. Don't mention that you may not be able to match Han Jidong's couplet. Even if you are lucky enough to match it, do you think this debauchee's shallow couplet can stump our entire Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute? This is a huge joke. Jun Moxie slapped his thigh, and grabbed a jar of wine from the table. Then, he placed his foot on a chair, raised his head, and drank 2 mouthfuls of wine. He pondered for a moment, raised his head again, and drank 2 mouthfuls of wine. Everyone's eyes were focused on him. Even His Majesty the Emperor was no exception. He was looking at him with great interest, and a faint cold light flashed in his eyes. If Jun Moxie is able to match this couplet, then I'll have to re-evaluate the Jun family. Dugu Xiaoyi and Princess Raimo looked at him anxiously. They couldn't help but complain in their hearts, what are you trying to show off? I'll lose a lot of face if I can't match it. However, they didn't dare to say anything for fear of disturbing his train of thought. Duguing saw that Jun Moxie had already drunk more than half of his wine jar. He anxiously asked, hey! Don't tell me you're using this opportunity to drink more wine. Dugu Xiaoyi fiercely glared at her elder brother and angrily said, why are you so anxious? Duguing scratched his head and sat down in embarrassment. Then, he anxiously looked at the wine jar in Jun Moxie's hand. Suddenly, Jun Xia raised his head, raised his right hand, and snapped his fingers. It was clear and crisp as he said, "Got it." Jun Dashao proudly recited the second half of his couplet under the expectant gazes of the crowd. Chaser smelly street. Human excrement stinks. Dog excrement stinks. Pig excrement stinks. Excrement stinks. Excrement stinks. Excrement stinks. Excrement stinks for 10,000 years. 10,000 years alone stinks. Everyone was shocked. Absolutely, truly absolutely. Using fragrance to fight stench, using sh*t to fight flowers. Blurg. Tang Yuan hurriedly jumped out to praise, but before he could finish his words, he was already disgusted by the word absolutely. He couldn't say a word and only felt nauseous. This pair was really too disgusting, it was too disgusting. Plus, he had just eaten a lot of food. It would be strange if he didn't feel disgusted and vomited. Everyone had a strange expression on their faces as they looked at Jun Moxie with grief and indignation. Suddenly, the princess of the Silver Blizzard City, Han Yen Meng, ran out of the room with her hands covering her mouth. Then, the young ladies of the Silver Blizzard City also covered their mouths and ran away. In the end, even Dugu Xiaoyi covered her mouth and ran away. Before she ran out, she rolled her eyes at Jun Moxie. "Who dares to say that I'm wrong? Are we doing a good job?" Jun Moxie raised his arm and casually grabbed a crab. Then, he took out the crab roe, stuffed it into his mouth, and started to chew. Everyone looked at him as he stuffed the yellow crab roe into his mouth. And, they recalled the extremely disgusting second half of the couplet from a moment ago. And, everyone's faces turned pale. Everyone was speechless. The couplet has indeed matched. Moreover, it has severely cursed these Confucian scholars. In fact, the words Confucian stinks are enough to make these old scholars tremble in anger. Even Kong Ling Yang and Mei Gao Jie didn't dare to say that this couplet wasn't matched or that it wasn't neat. However, if you were to come up with this kind of couplet when everyone was eating, wouldn't you be looking for trouble on purpose? You've matched the second half of the couplet, but you've made everyone lose their appetite. Every dog has its day. Now, it's my turn to come up with a question. Jun Moxie proudly waved the half crab in his hand. "I remember that half a month ago, I was studying poetry at home. Suddenly, an old friend of my grandfather's came to visit. This friend's name was very strange. Therefore, it left a deep impression on me. His surname was He, and his given name was Shang. He gave my grandfather a painting. It was a lotus painting that he had personally drawn. He left behind a couplet before he left. My grandfather asked many people for help, but none of them were able to match it." Speaking till here, Dugu Xiaoyi and the other women came back with pale faces. Each of them glared hatefully at Jun Xia. In fact, it seemed as if they wished they could run over and bite him. Someone asked curiously, "I wonder what the first half of the couplet that Jun Sunshao mentioned is?" The first half of the couplet is very simple. It only has 7 words, lotus flower monk painting. Jun Moxie snorted twice and threw out this absolute. As for this black pot, it was pushed onto Grandpa Jun. Since Grandpa Jun was present, he wasn't afraid of being exposed. In this world, there were many people who couldn't be trusted. However, his own grandfather was definitely one of the most trustworthy people. Forget about lying to his grandson. Even if he didn't do so, Grandpa Jun would still have to clean up this mess for his grandson. Lotus flower monk painting. Lotus flower monk painting. Everyone frowned when they heard this first half of the couplet. This first half of the couplet seemed very simple. However, after careful consideration, everyone sucked in a mouthful of cold air. It could be read in any case. Moreover, the meaning was the same. There was a person's name embedded in the middle of the couplet. Although the first and last words were the same, one was moving while the other was quiet. All the old teachers furrowed their brows. They never imagined that this unscrupulous, ignorant, and incompetent profligate would throw out such a difficult question the moment he opened his mouth. In the face of this absolute, the scholars of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute fell into an unprecedented and bitter struggle. The 20 scholars frowned and thought hard. Everyone racked their brains and racked their brains. Their own difficult question had already been answered by June Moxie. Even if the second half of the couplet was unbearable, it was still a fact that it couldn't be changed. However, the other party's question had been answered, and they were at their wits' end. If they couldn't answer it, then it would be tantamount to the entire Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute being stumped by June Moxie. This was an unbelievable myth. However, this myth had actually happened. If the entire Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute couldn't perfectly solve this absolute, then they would be stumped by an unscrupulous debauchee. How humiliating would that be? The entire Tianxiang Heavenly Literature Institute represented the highest level of learning. In fact, this first half of the couplet was considered an absolute even in June Moxie's previous life on Earth. Countless people racked their brains and racked their brains. But they were barely able to match the second half of the couplet. Moreover, no one had been able to match the second half of the couplet in a flawless manner, whether it was in terms of concept, rhythm, or other conditions. It would be very difficult for these scholars to match such an absolute within the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. The two old teachers were also racking their brains. Mei Gao Jia frowned as he slowly paced back and forth. From time to time, he would shake his head and murmur, "No, no." Then, he would continue to ponder. Kong Ling Yang remained motionless. He closed his eyes and looked up at the sky. There was a look of deep contemplation on his face. From afar, the wrinkles on his face seemed to have deepened. His white hair seemed to have turned as white as snow. Anyone who looked at him couldn't help but feel a kind of sadness in their hearts. In fact, this duel was aimed at the scholars of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute. So, the two old teachers shouldn't have intervened. In fact, it was against the rules. However, the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute's 100-year reputation was at stake. So, the two old teachers couldn't care less. As for Jun Dashao, he didn't care about this at all. Let alone the two old fogies, even if you find 10 or 20 more of them, so what? Time passed slowly. The incense stick continued to emit green smoke in spirals. Then, it finally turned into ashes. The miracle didn't happen. I can't match it. I admit defeat. Han Jidong hung his head dejectedly. He couldn't help but feel a strong sense of defeat in his heart. He was a talented scholar of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute. But, he was about to lose to a debauchee like June Moxie. He wanted to die at this moment. No! You may have lost, but you weren't the one who lost. At least, you weren't the only one who lost. June Moxie half reclined on his chair. He slowly extended a finger and gently shook it, because, the one who made the bet with me wasn't you. You're only a chess piece here. A most unremarkable chess piece. You don't have the qualifications to make a bet with me. You don't have the qualifications in any aspect. You're far from it. Then, Jun Moxie raised his chin, and looked at Mei Gao Jia and Kong Ling Yang with a smile. Two old teachers, what do you say? We've lost. The faces of the two old men were in a daze. Their eyes didn't have the vigor that they had when they'd first entered the hall. They were the acknowledged geniuses of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute. But, they had to admit defeat in front of Jun Moxie. This was an intense humiliation. The two old men felt as if they were better off dead than alive. Kong Ling Yang's lips trembled as he said in a low voice, "This old man will fulfill his promise. The Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute won't talk about couplets in front of you, Jun Moxie." The hall became deathly silent for a moment. Jun Moxie sighed. He respected the strength of character of these two old men. So, he didn't want to push them to this point. These two had organized the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute. They had selected the best students for the empire. Moreover, the students who had been selected to join the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute weren't poor or lowly. Instead, they were talented and knowledgeable. They didn't care about wealth or power. These points alone were worthy of Jun Moxi's admiration. However, these two men were indeed respectable. But they were still lacking in many aspects. In terms of knowledge, the two of them were naturally sufficient, but in terms of methods and objectives, the two of them were wrong. They had only focused on the cultivation of knowledge. But they had neglected the cultivation of character. A teacher wasn't just a simple imparting of knowledge. Before Jun Moxi had transmigrated to this world, there had been a widespread saying, "Teachers are the engineers of the human soul." It was true that the so-called great Confucian scholars of a generation would teach their disciples who were knowledgeable, outstanding in poetry, and extremely good at strategy. They would also deliberately cultivate their political abilities. This would ensure that they would be able to display their talents as soon as possible once they entered the official career. However, they had neglected one point. If they didn't have a good temperament, and only cared about their own interests, fame, and wealth, then they would become extremely dreadful officials. There was no need to mention anything else. However, the disciples of these two old men numbered in the thousands in the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute. But it was undeniable that each and every one of them would be able to find their own job even if they couldn't move unhindered in the officialdom. But the disciples of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute would be excellent candidates for the advisors of the major powers and clans. Even the most incompetent of them would be able to obtain the position of an advisor or a copywriter. How much harm would this group of people who entered society without going through moral education cause to the ordinary people? This was simply unimaginable. Therefore, Jun Moxi couldn't bear to see this happen. He couldn't bear to see this happen. In fact, he even despised them. Therefore, Jun Moxi wouldn't feel that he had done anything wrong even if he were to anger these two old men to death. In fact, he would even feel that it was the right thing to do. I'm not a good person. And I don't have any interest in caring about the sufferings of the common people. But you want to bully me? Then, I will reluctantly enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. Chapter 291. Third Young Master Jun. Although the two masters are open and aboveboard, and have long seen through victory and defeat are ephemeral, and do not care about the gains and losses of this moment, and disdain to lower themselves to the same level as you. But, I would like to ask, Third Young Master Jun, do you have a second verse for this couplet? If you have an excellent second verse, please bestow it upon us, and let us broaden our horizons. A scholar from the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute stood up. He was clearly unconvinced by the loss of this round. How can you be more hypocritical than Li Yuran? Jun Moxi looked at him in astonishment. Please use your brain when thinking about things. Don't always use your butt to think about problems. If I had a couplet that even I could match, would I use it to make things difficult for others? Did you get kicked by a donkey when you were young? How can the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute produce such an idiot like you? Oh, right, I see that not only is your brain stupid, but your ears are also deaf, right? Before I set the question, I clearly said that this was a question set by someone else, and no one has been able to match it to this day. I just borrowed it, and which ear did you hear that I made it myself? I see that either you don't have a brain, or your brain is full of mold. You actually want a second verse from me? You really have the nerve to ask. Is the Heavenly Star Academy filled with people who only care about winning and losing? Are they unreasonable people? Jun Dashao opened his mouth this time, and not many people had anything to say. After all, he had already stated that this couplet was not his own before he set the question. He had obtained it from somewhere else, and it was clearly used to make things difficult for others. At this moment, that scholar had used this to make things difficult for others, and wanted to use this as a pretext to save some face. But, it was a waste of effort, and even made others laugh at him. That scholar's face turned red. The others did not think much of it, and only Li Yuran opened her eyes in surprise. What's wrong with this person? Why did he involve me again? What did he mean by, how can you be more hypocritical than Li Yuan? Damn it, is this what a human is saying? How am I hypocritical? The master has just admitted defeat, and now he sends his disciple to act shamelessly? Could it be that the Wenqing Heavenly Literature Institute is such a sore loser? Jun Moxie's voice was very loud and full of energy. If you really can't afford to lose, then this young master won't mind taking a step back. This young master may not be a good person, but I still know how to respect the elderly and the wise. So you still know that you're not a good person? Everyone rolled their eyes in disbelief. Is there anyone who respects the elderly as much as you do? You've almost sent the two old masters to the ground with your respect. Yen Feng, stand down. A loss was a loss, and there was no need to argue about it. Why bother with the gains and losses of 1 or 2 times? This is only the first round. Don't tell me that our Wenqing Heavenly Literature Institute doesn't have a chance to turn things around. Kong Ling Yang's lips trembled as he sternly reprimanded his disciple. Old man Kong did not bother with the gains and losses of 1 or 2 times. This was not a simple loss of a competition. This time, they had lost a great deal of face. In previous years, there had been victories and defeats at the autumn scholarly feasts. However, those feasts had always been held at the center of the Moon Lake. Moreover, His Majesty the Emperor had not been present. But this time, it had been held at the Imperial Palace. Not only was His Majesty the Emperor present, but all the high-ranking officials of the empire were present as well. The scale of the feasts was many times larger than in previous years. But, they had lost at this time. Wouldn't this be extremely depressing? The Wenqing Heavenly Literature Institute had hated Fatty and Tang Yuan the most in the past. However, Fatty had now fallen to second place, and Jun Dashao was now at the top of the list. Moreover, this had never changed in 10,000 years. The old, middle-aged, and young scholars of the Wenqing Heavenly Literature Institute hated Jun Dashao to the bone. Teacher Kong is right. Couplets are just a game that scholars play to pass the time when they're bored. What truly reflects one's talent is poetry, song, zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Li Yuan calmly smiled and said, "Don't tell me that there's no one better than the young Master Jun." These words were very vicious. If the Wenqing Heavenly Literature Institute were to give up in front of all the civil and military officials, wouldn't that mean that the institute was admitting that there was no one better than the debauchee Jun Moxie? How could the Wenqing Heavenly Literature Institute collapse? How could they let this go? Swords were drawn and bows were bent. I can see that this brat Li Yuan doesn't have good intentions. This pretty boy doesn't have good intentions. He wants to use these old men's knives to force me to show my cards. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes, and tilted his head to one side. It seemed that his face was very close to Dugu Xiaoyi's small mouth. Then, he nodded, and laughed with confidence. "You're right. The Wenqing Heavenly Literature Institute has sent a lot of people this time. Fortunately, we're also full of talented people. How can we, the descendants of the great families, be afraid? This young master and young master Yuan will join hands to fight against the Wenqing Heavenly Literature Institute. It won't matter who wins or loses." Young Master Yuan also said that he admires this young master in many aspects. This means that this young master's skills are better than his. In other words, this young master is much better than Li Yuan. Everyone heard that, right? So, if you can't even compare to young Master Yuan, then don't come looking for me. This young master is very busy. Time is very precious. Every moment brings in tens of millions of taels of silver. How can I afford to delay? These words were said in a very beautiful way. Not only did he tie all the young masters to his worship, but he also pushed Li Yuan out as the #1 scapegoat. It was both offensive and defensive. It was an untraceable move. Everyone looked at him with admiration. However, they weren't looking at Jun Moxie, but at Dugu Xiaoyi. Jun Mo Xia tilted his head and nodded. Then, his attitude changed greatly. He even said that he was capable of both offense and defense, and that he could advance and retreat freely. Even a wooden person would be able to see that something was wrong. If Du Xiaoyi hadn't given him this move, then he would have seen a ghost. How could such a scoundrel be able to say something of such standard? Besides, this guy's words were very unnatural. It was as if he was reciting from a book. Moreover, there wasn't a single word of vulgarity in his words. If he hadn't been taught this, then it would have been too bizarre. Jun Moxie leaned back on the chair and closed his eyes. Looking at his shameless appearance, he wouldn't answer even if he was asked anything. The people of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute felt helpless. They had no choice but to turn to Li Yuran, so, we will ask young Master Li for advice first. Li Yuran stood up with a smile. She nodded slightly, it's an honor. She didn't feel disgusted that Jun Moxie had pushed her forward. To be honest, Jun Moxie had already won a match. Whether it was a glorious victory or not, a win was a win. Li Yuran, who felt that she was favored by the heavens, didn't want to be defeated by him. His Majesty, who was sitting on the dragon throne, intentionally or unintentionally glanced at Li Yuran. Then, he lowered his eyes and looked at Jun Moxie and Du Xiaoyi from the corner of his eyes. His expression was unfathomable. Since we've already matched the couplet and heard that young Master Li's flute is well known throughout the world, how about we compete in music for this match? I'm Jin Yinzhen. I'd like to ask young Master Yuran for advice. A scholar slowly stepped forward. He bowed to the emperor and the elders first. Then, he turned to face Li Yuran. His movements were calm and unhurried. He gently held a jade flute made of white jade in his hand. Young Master Jin Yin's music is well known throughout the world. How can Yuran compare to you? There's no need for this match. I admit defeat. Li Yuran bitterly smiled. Li Yuran didn't admit defeat on purpose. On this occasion, young Master Li wanted to show off. After all, this was in front of the emperor. If he could leave a good impression, then no matter what he did in the future, he would be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. However, this Jin Yinzhen was a formidable opponent. Moreover, he was a formidable opponent that was difficult to match. This person's flute skills were passed down through his family. When he was only 15 years old, his name had already spread throughout the continent. How could a person like Li Yuran compare to him? Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute had clearly sent him here to win this match. They wanted to establish a tie between the two sides. Then, the real battle would begin. Haha, young Master Mo Xia and I will each take a match. Yuran is ashamed of this match. My skills are not as good as yours. I admit defeat. Li Yuran's expression didn't change. She said, the next match is young Master Mo Xia's turn. Yuran wishes Jun Sunshao a victory. Jun Moxie said, fuck. This guy didn't even try to compete. He directly admitted defeat. This was too much. If it were me, no matter how strong the opponent was, I would have shouted a pop song. I would rather be beaten to death than be scared to death. The autumn scholarly feast was usually started by two sides provoking each other. Then, it would start with poetry, music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Then, it would move on to national strategy, people's livelihood, foreign strategy, and so on. It would only end when all the skills had been competed. At present, under Jun Moxie's nonsense, two opposing factions had been formed. However, whether it was the smell of gunpowder or the intensity of the confrontation, it had far surpassed the previous years. This point could be clearly felt by those who had participated in previous autumn scholarly feasts. Only Jun Dashao and Fatty Tang, who had participated in the competition for the first time, hadn't seen this. They had participated in the previous autumn scholarly feasts as well. But, that was to pick up girls. So, it couldn't be compared to this. Next was the poetry competition. The Minister of Rites, Sun Chenghe, discussed with everyone for a while. Then, they decided to come up with a topic on the spot. Then, both sides would compose a poem and compete on the spot to determine the winner. The topic of this poetry competition will be knowledge. Both sides, please choose a candidate. Sun Chenghe looked at Jun Moxie and shook his head. It was obvious that he had already decided the winner in his heart. So, he sighed. Jun Moxie didn't intend to win. So, he just laughed it off. Another blue-clothed scholar stood up. His name was Qin Qiushi. It was easy to imagine how much this Qin Qiushi's parents were obsessed with scholarly honors just from this name alone. Please enlighten me, young Master Jun. Qin Qiushi frowned and pondered for a while. Then, he cleared his throat and spoke in a clear voice after some time had passed. The eunuch on the other side was already prepared. He held his wrist and raised his elbow. He was attentively waiting for Qin Qiushi to speak. He was ready to record the entire process. Bravely climbing the book mountain to reach the clouds, daring to cross the sea of learning to see the angry tide, there's no need to take shortcuts if one's heart is honest and diligent. Climbing the stars and plucking the dough isn't far away. I'm willing to dedicate myself to the country. How can I be stingy with my hot-bloodedness? If I can make even an inch of progress in this life, I won't be in vain by waving my brush today. This Qin Qiushi was indeed extraordinary. He had only spent half an incense stick's worth of time to compose a poem of 7 lines. The artistic conception of this poem wasn't top-notch. But the couplets were very good. In fact, it could be regarded as a top-notch work. Moreover, it not only clarified his attitude towards learning, but also faintly showed his lofty aspirations for the country. The eunuch finished transcribing the poem. Then, he respectfully handed it over to the emperor to look at. The emperor glanced at it. Then, he gazed deeply at Qin Qiushi. His face remained expressionless. He waved his hand, and ordered the civil officials to pass the poem around. The officials nodded in agreement. These people are talented. But, I wouldn't have been able to compose a better poem in half an incense stick's worth of time if I had been in the same position. Good poem. Good poem. Brother Qin has recited a good poem. Jun Moxie clapped his hands. This Jun Moxie admits defeat in this poem recitation skill. His speed is too fast. He's a fast shooter. Many thanks for young Master Jun's praise. But, this young man's talent is limited. So, I've made young Master Jun and the other seniors laugh at me. Qin Qiushi couldn't understand the profound meaning behind Jun Moxie's words. So, he modestly said, I ask young Master Jun to give me some pointers. I'm also waiting to hear young Master Jun's great work. My great work? No. This young master has a lot of resources. I can shoot at will. I don't need to recite a poem. Jun Moxie hastily declined modestly. But, it sounded incoherent to everyone. Tang Yuan suddenly burst into laughter. He laughed for a while. Then, it seemed that he couldn't control himself. He held his big belly, and laughed so hard that his face started to twitch. His whole body started to spasm. It seemed that he was going to die soon. Tang Yuan had been under Jun Dashao's influence for a long time. So, he had started to show signs of surpassing his master. The other people might not have understood what Jun Dashao had recited. But, Fatty had understood it very clearly. So, how could he not laugh? Everyone who didn't understand the mystery behind it despised him. This Fatty isn't honest. You're with Jun Moxie. But, you're rejoicing in his misfortune when you see him making a fool of himself. This kind of character makes people despise him. Young Master Jun is brimming with talent. So, how can you admit defeat? That won't do. You have to recite a poem for everyone to judge. Han Zhidong had jumped out to wave the flag and shout. He was determined to make Jun Mo Xia make a fool of himself. Don't tell me that young Master Jun disdains to compete with us. Mei Gao Jia rolled his eyes and said in a dense manner, that's unacceptable. Jun Sunshao comes from a family that values martial arts. So, it's inevitable that he doesn't have any literary talent. A scholar of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute chuckled. He was full of complacent satisfaction. He was very pleased to see Jun Moxie make a fool of himself. It's expected that he would admit defeat. Don't tell me that you're surprised. As soon as these words were spoken, it was like a superb cold joke. Both those who wanted to laugh and those who didn't all laughed loudly, and their laughter was filled with ridicule. I really, really despise you. Jun Moxie obviously wouldn't say these words out loud. But, you're asking for a scolding. And, you're asking for it in such an urgent manner. So, this young master will be letting you down if he doesn't give you a good scolding, Jun Moxie snorted coldly. Then, he said with emotion, this young master won't refuse since everyone is so kind. But, this young master has never done anything like that. So, I won't compose a poem. I'll just casually recite a song for everyone to listen to. Casually recite a song? Young Master Jun is very talented. He can compose a poem with just a wave of his hand. I admire him. It's that Han Jidong again. He has hated Jun Moxie ever since he lost the couplet match. How could I have ended up in such a difficult situation if not for Jun Moxie? It would be equivalent to Jun Moxie ruining my life if I lose my future because of this. How can I let go of this opportunity to take revenge? He wasn't doing this for the sake of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute's victory or defeat. Instead, he was venting his anger for his own selfish reasons. Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute's scholars. Jun Moxie tilted his head and smiled. Then, he suddenly said in a meaningful manner, they all have the same character? Why do I feel that they aren't as good as me? I'm a debauchee. I'm a debauchee. I'm a debauchee who commits all kinds of crimes. Is such a person the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute is recommending to the Empire's rising stars? I don't understand. Wouldn't such a person be a groom every day, and a bride every night if they were in charge of a government? These words had been spoken in a light manner. It seemed as if they were purely unintentional. But, it seemed as if he was cursing on the spot. But, the speaker didn't mean it. The Emperor's eyes suddenly flashed. His complexion changed, and he started to ponder. All the big shots were also startled. They seemed to be lost in thought. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but remember that the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute's desire to win in the past year's scholarly feasts had been a little too strong. Everyone's gaze turned towards Jun Moxie after a moment of contemplation. Did this guy say it unintentionally? Or did he deliberately point it out? They were disappointed as they looked at him. This guy's current appearance is too wretched. Jun Moxie frowned as he finished speaking. He slowly walked out of his seat. His neck was still crooked. He didn't know what he had just said. Lord Ba's steps were very natural. He twisted his waist and took a step. It seemed as if he was moving forward and backward. One of his hands was behind his back, and the other hand was trembling in front of his chest. It seemed as if it had been electrocuted. His movements seemed to be wooden. But, they were quite smooth. They were strange and elegant. Any earthling would have recognized it if they had seen it. This was Michael Jackson's famous move, space step and mechanical step. The combination of these two great skills had finally appeared in this different world. If there were people who knew what was good for them, they would have immediately screamed and cheered. Look at those trembling hands. It's like they've been electrocuted. Look at that stiff neck. It's really awesome. Look at those few steps. Wow! It's as if Michael Jackson's soul has possessed this body. It's a pity that these people from this different world don't know how to appreciate art. Jun Dashao felt as if he was trying to flirt with a blind person. Unappreciated talent. But, I'm about to curse. Why should I care about my image? The worse, the better. I don't expect these people to give me any help. I won't go back if I don't curse to my heart's content today. Everyone in the main hall looked as if they had seen a fool. Everyone couldn't bear to watch. This grandson Jun Zhantian is really a clown. He has found a home. How did the Jun family produce such a treasure? Speechless, at this moment, Jun Dashao twisted his waist. His entire body made a standard electric shock motion. His right hand twitched above his head, and made an orchid gesture. With a snap of his fingers, his left hand covered his lower abdomen. His waist moved back and forth leisurely, swaying back and forth. His coquettish eyes fluttered everywhere. One couldn't help but admit that if these movements were placed in the world of Jun Dashao's previous world, they would have been genuine and extremely difficult masterpieces of dance. Without a deep foundation, it would have been absolutely impossible to do. As for why Jun Dashao could do it, the reason was very simple. As long as one had the same skills as Jun Dashao, one could easily do it as well. However, in the eyes of these dummies, these extremely difficult and artistic high-level movements were directly associated with bed activities. Even the women were no exception. Looking at the high-speed movements of this guy's lower body, it was really too unsightly. I got it. Jun Moxie seemed to groan strangely, causing all the princesses and talented ladies in the main hall to blush. One after another, they cursed angrily. This guy is really too vulgar and shameless. He actually dared to tease us in front of so many people. With Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes were spitting fire. Princess Raima's pretty face was deathly pale. Both women had a desire: immediately push this lecher to the ground and give him a good beating. This is too disgraceful. This is simply offensive to public morals. Want to talk about love with me? Not beautiful. Don't talk to me about love. I'm too bad. Don't be infatuated with this brother. This brother is just a legend. Don't provoke me. I'll make you vomit blood. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, Jun Dashao's poem was finally revealed. Moreover, he used an extremely unbearable voice, and each sentence was clearly heard. Jun Dashao's finger was coincidentally pointing in the direction of the scholars of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute when he said the last sentence. His face was full of anger. I'll curse you old bastards to death. Are you trying to make things difficult for me? Don't you know what kind of person I am? The entire hall was in an uproar. Which one of the people present wasn't a shrewd person? Every one of them was a wily old fox in the officialdom. They had spent most of their lives observing people's expressions. Even if someone's words were taboo, they would still carefully analyze it for a long time. Moreover, Jun Moxie was directly pointing at their noses and cursing them. Every sentence was the behavior of a hooligan. Every sentence was the style of a scoundrel. The last 8 sentences were pointed at the nose of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute. His spittle flew everywhere as he cursed. Moreover, there were threats, insults, and threats. Finally, it involved the elders. You. Mei Gao Jia and Kong Ling Yang were both erudite scholars. When had anyone ever pointed at their noses and humiliated them like this? Moreover, a debauchee young master had wantonly cursed them in front of hundreds of civil and military officials in front of the emperor. They were so angry that their hands and feet started to tremble. Their beards started to tremble. Their pale old faces turned blue in an instant. They trembled for a long time. Then, they rolled their eyes, and fainted. What an evil creature! Jun Zhantian jumped out with a whoosh. He was so angry that his beard had flared up. It seemed that he had lost control of his strength due to his anger. He ruthlessly kicked his grandson's buttocks. Jun Xie stealthily blinked his eyes. Then, he flew up into the air and crashed into a pillar in the main hall. It seemed that his brain would have burst open if he had hit the pillar. However, there was a person there. Who was it? It was naturally Dugu Zonghang. These 2 old men had been working together for a lifetime. So, who didn't know what the other was thinking? He had already taken his position. So, he caught Jun Moxie and shouted, Jun Zhantian. You old thing, have you gone senile? Don't tell me that you want to kill the only heir of your Jun family. This old man is really ruthless. He said that he's the only heir of the Jun family. So, I won't kill him. Don't stop me today. I will kill this little bastard today. He's a disgrace to the Jun family. He's a disgrace to the Jun family. He'll turn the sky upside down if I don't teach him a good lesson. Jun Zhantian's eyes turned red as he pounced forward. It seemed that he was determined to skin his grandson alive. However, the old master's words made all the civil and military officials despise him. A disgrace to the Jun family? Jun Zhantian, do you know what it means to be a gentleman? Isn't it because you spoiled your grandson? Don't you sully the Jun family's reputation a few times? You wanted to kill him a moment ago. But, you changed your mind and taught him a lesson. I admire you. However, the old man Dugu had already set an example in front of them. So, the other old men swarmed forward, and pulled Jun Zhantian's arms and legs. After all, they had to pull Jun Zhantian away first. Otherwise, how would this old man get off the stage? Fatty Tang screamed. His voice sounded like the weeping of ghosts and the howling of gods. You want to kill him? Kill him. Save him. Third young master. My good brother, you. Please don't die. He ran towards Jun Imo Xia with tears and snot running down his face. His fat was like the rising tide of the sea, rising and falling like the tide, surging up and down. While the quarrel was getting out of hand, the emperor on the dragon throne could no longer watch it. He slapped the armrest of the dragon throne and shouted angrily, "Shut up, all of you! Everyone stop! What a scandal!" Everyone stopped as soon as they heard the dragon's might. They looked at each other, and gasped for breath. Everyone seemed to have exhausted their physical strength. But, everyone knew that no one had the strength to do so. Your Majesty, please give us justice. Severely punish this deranged and shameless man. Mei Gao Jia led the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute to kneel on the ground. They wept bitterly. How many years had it been? They had lost, and they had won. But, they had never been humiliated like this. This was simply a great humiliation. Jun Moxie lay on the ground, and pretended to be unconscious. The corners of his mouth were crooked, and he didn't move. I'm very unhappy about today's matter. It's very disappointing. His Majesty angrily flicked his sleeves. The great families are pestering us endlessly. The so-called scholars of the Wenxing Heavenly Literature Institute are so narrow-minded. They seek revenge for the smallest grievance. How can they benefit the people in the future? Today's matter is over. Everyone go back and reflect on themselves. Everyone seemed to be in a daze as he said this. The emperor's words are very heavy. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps was heard from outside. Then, a panic-stricken voice was heard, "Urgent battle report." All the big shots in the military were startled. Their expressions turned cold. Battle report is what these bloodthirsty old men desire the most. But, it hasn't appeared for a long time. A guard hurriedly came in, and knelt on the ground. He then presented a letter. The Tian Fa Xian beasts are attacking the south. How can this happen? His Majesty opened the letter, and couldn't help but frown. He was puzzled as he muttered to himself. His eyebrows were tightly knitted. The Supreme Master of Life and Death, Shi Changshao, and the Shuihun Manor have both issued a supreme summon order. Could it be that this matter is so serious? The Golden Scholars Banquet is somewhat boring. This chapter quickly ends. Let's move on to the theme of the third book. It's the first meticulously planned plot of this book, the Tian Fa Forest. Guess, what kind of story will happen? Quack, recommended book, The Dark Sky Devil's sci-fi masterpiece, The Betrayer. Chapter 292. In a secluded room. It was a simple and unadorned chessboard. The black and white pieces had already become entangled, and the battle was exceptionally intense. Brother Wen, how do you feel about today's incident? The emperor gently pressed down a black piece, and it made a crisp sound. Wen Songyu was standing opposite him. It was the first time the emperor had seen his best friend wearing such a black outfit in the imperial palace. It's still hard to tell. But, I can confirm that he doesn't have much Xian Qi in his body. Wen Songyu's expression didn't change. His eyes flashed a little, and he put down a white piece. Brother Wen's intention is to kill me, a great dragon? That won't be easy. The emperor smiled and said, but, I feel that there's something wrong with that kid from the June family. What do you think? It's not just not right, it's very wrong. Mr. Wen closed his eyes and thought for a while. Then, he said, June Moxie is very strange. His way of doing things is evil and unrestrained. Today, in the main hall, although he looked like a playboy and fooled the world, according to this old man, he is not pretending. Brother Wen, you mean? The emperor slightly lowered his head. He put a finger on his temple and rubbed it. I'm afraid he doesn't care about anyone here. Mr. Wen said this in a thoughtful tone. It was obvious that he had been thinking about June Moxie's every move for a long time. He was just taking advantage of this opportunity to say the answer in his mind. He doesn't even care about anyone, including His Majesty. Oh? So that's what you mean? The emperor's hand paused in the air. Do you have any good advice? What kind of advice is that? I just think that June Mos used a well-known foppish method to show everyone his arrogance. But at the same time, he also told His Majesty one thing. Wen Sangyu laughed. He doesn't care about the power struggles of the world. The emperor answered for him, he told me clearly that I don't need to be afraid of him. Moreover, he reminded me that the education of the Wenqing Institute is a failure, and that those so-called gifted scholars are unbearable. He showed me the hidden dangers of the empire and the shortcomings of the officialdom. He made me owe him a big favor. Yes, there is really no need to deliberately guard against such people. Originally, the Heavenly Star Academy has been educating talents for many years and has made great contributions. Their merits cannot be erased. However, in recent years, they have placed too much emphasis on the cultivation of the talents of the students and neglected the teaching of their temperament. There is a great suspicion of neglecting the essentials and focusing on the trifles. Moreover, the students that are nurtured by the Heavenly Star Academy are at most geniuses or the best of the best. However, when it comes to leadership and being a hero among men, they are far from being able to do so. So, the hidden dangers of the Wenqing Institute are just a small matter. Among the descendants of the officials in Tianxiang, there are many extraordinary people, but most of them are still under control. Only 2 people are worrying, the talented ones. Wen Sangyu smiled, one is Li Yuran, and the other is June Moxie. Li Yuran? His Majesty smiled, Li Yuran has great ambitions. Not only is he extremely scheming, he doesn't show his emotions on his face. Moreover, his way of dealing with people is even more slick and watertight. I've often heard people say that this child has the ability to win a battle from 1,000 miles away. However, even though Li Yuran is brimming with talent and outstanding talent, he is still unable to make me pay attention to him. Why? It was Wen Songyu's turn to be confused. How could he not care about such a talented person? Maybe Li Yuran hasn't realized that all the methods he has mastered and all the knowledge he has studied have one thing in common. He can be a general, a marshal, or a prime minister. He can even be a political assistant. But, these are the ways of a subject, not the ways of an emperor. The emperor smiled, therefore, Li Yuran can only stop at the level of a talented person at best. At most, he is an outstanding person. If he can take another step forward, he can be considered an ambitious and ruthless person. But, he doesn't have the bearing of a monarch. Even if he is ambitious, he is not worthy of praise. I am confident that I can extinguish his ambition when it is about to rise. What is there to worry about? How can an emperor play with such a shameful plot? Li Yuran is used to being behind the scenes. Even if he is asked to stand out, he will not. Even if he is forced to, he will not be used to it. But the talent of an emperor needs to face the world with dignity. So, Li Yuran may be a temporary choice, but we don't need to worry about him for the time being. We just need to pay attention to his movements. If we can use him, use him. If we can't, get rid of him. He may be able to make some waves, but he will never be able to form a tsunami. The emperor's words had eliminated Tianxiang's #1 talent, Li Yuran, from the list. Your Majesty is thoughtful. I admire you. Wen Songyu thought about it carefully and finally agreed. He had to admit that in terms of judging people, the emperor was indeed much better than him. This was because when he looked at people, he looked at them from the perspective of an emperor, while he looked at them from the perspective of a martial arts master. The difference between the two was like the difference between heaven and earth. They were not on the same path. Only Jun Moxie is far more dangerous than Li Yuran. The degree of danger between the two can't even be mentioned in the same breath. Li Yuran has shown off his ability, but Jun Moxie is still like a dragon hiding in the abyss. Once he is fully grown, he can fly with his claws. Although he has made it clear that he has no interest in power, no matter which direction he goes, he will be outstanding. Li Yuran can turn the clouds and rain with one turn of the hand, but he is still controllable. Once Jun Moxie shows up, he will be a peerless sword. No one will be able to stop him. His Majesty heaved a deep sigh. Although there are many talented people in the various countries of the continent, there has never been a peerless talent like Jun Xia and Li Yuran. If I had another 50 years, I would be able to carefully study these two people. In the future, one of them would be able to become the pillars of the empire, one of them being a scholar and the other a warrior. Moreover, their personalities are at odds with each other, so they are the best partners to keep the balance. But now that these two people have appeared, I really don't know if it is a blessing or a curse for Tianxiang Kingdom. Your Majesty is in the prime of your life. You are in the prime of your life. Why do you say that? Wen Songyu smiled and comforted. I know my body well. I may have 10 or 20 years to live, but I can't hold on any longer. Even the Poison King said that there is a limit to the strength of a man. My body is beyond what a man can do. Mr. Wen, you don't have to comfort me anymore. The only thing I am worried about right now is that these two men are talents that can only be found by chance. While I am alive, I am confident that I can control them. But once I am gone, none of my 3 sons will be able to control them. Even if I can only deal with one of them, it will still be beyond my power. At that time, the emperor sighed sadly. At present, the world is peaceful. The border is safe. All the big families in the kingdom are loyal to your Majesty. I believe that nothing will happen in the short term. When Songyu explained, Your Majesty, you can rest assured. In fact, the main reason why I can't make up my mind at present is because nothing has happened. Mr. Wen probably didn't realize that Li Yuran and Jun Moxie have replaced the older generation and become the key figures to maintain the balance between the military and the government. If anything happens to either of them, the balance will be broken, and the peace in the kingdom will be torn apart. So, we can't touch them now. But if we keep them, they will be more dangerous in the future than they are now. Moreover, the country could easily be destroyed. Your Majesty, do you mean to get rid of them now? Wen Songyu thought for a while and asked slowly with his head lowered. Absolutely not. I have wronged the Jun family enough. How can I get rid of the only bloodline of the Jun family? His Majesty smiled bitterly. Even Mr. Wen didn't believe his words. Moreover, it's not the right time. Brother Wen, please think about it. If Jun Xia were to die, would our Tianxiang Empire be able to withstand the turmoil that would ensue? Even if he dies, it must be an accident. Otherwise, the counterattack of the Jun family will be a life-and-death struggle. From this point of view, we can't make a move before the Jun family's factions are divided. He sighed. Moreover, don't forget that there is another family behind Jun Moxie besides the Jun family. That family may not be as strong as the Silver Blizzard City or the Shui Hun Manor, but their counterattack after Jun Wu Hui's death made the entire continent tremble. He sighed with infinite regret. It seemed as if he was sighing from the depths of his heart and soul. From this sigh, Wen Songyu could clearly hear how annoyed and regretful the emperor, who had always been unpredictable and never showed his emotions on his face, was at this moment. The Dongfang family? The family of assassins that is recognized by the world? Wen Songyu suddenly opened his eyes and couldn't help but exclaim, didn't they disappear 8 years ago? Is the Dongfang family Jun Moxi's maternal family? You're right. His Majesty closed his eyes in pain. Then, he raised his head. Jun Wuhui and Jun Wumeng had died in battle that year. The Dongfang family's first-rate assassins had suddenly turned crazy, and had come out in full force. They had faced the Tianxiang Empire, the Silver Blizzard City, and the entire continent. The Silver Blizzard City's foreign personnel were being assassinated almost every moment that year. And the generals who had fought against Jun Wuhui were being assassinated almost every moment of the year. As for my internal injury, it was at that time that the Dongfang family consecutively sent out 17 first-rate assassins to exchange their lives for my injury, causing an injury that I am unable to recover from to this day, and will never recover from. At that time, not only the Silver Blizzard City Shao family sent all their elites, but even the Shui Hun Manor sent their men to help. All the great masters also acted openly and secretly. After a year, they finally suppressed the assassins. In the last battle, the Shao family's Xingyun and Buyu fought against the Dongfang family's old lady. They made a bet. Li Ju Tian and Han Feng Shui witnessed the fight. In the end, the Dongfang old lady lost by half a move. She had no choice but to gather her family's younger generation and announce that the Dongfang family would retire from the mountains. They also made a vow that the assassins of the Dongfang family would never appear on the continent unless the Sword Peak collapsed and the Xian beasts escaped from Tianfa. The Sword Peak collapsed and the Xian beasts escaped from Tianfa. Although Wen Songyu already knew about this, he couldn't help but be shocked when he heard it again. The Sword Peak has stood on the top of the snow mountain for thousands of years. How could it suddenly collapse? As for the Tianfa forest, it is a paradise for the Xian beasts. Maybe one or half of them escaped, but how could they all escape? The old lady of Dongfang's words are tantamount to announcing the Dongfang family's retirement. Not necessarily. Once someone touches the bottom line of the Dongfang family, they naturally have a reason to take action. And their bottom line is the people they care about. This vow only lasted for 5 years. Jun Mo Yu and Jun Mo Cho died in the Broken Spirit Ridge. The Dongfang family took action again, claiming that it was to avenge their nephew. All the generals of the Tianxi Empire who participated in the war were killed. In the middle of the night, the heads of these generals were thrown into my palace with a note attached. There was a sentence on the note: if anything happens to Jun Moxi, the next target will be the Tianxiang Imperial Palace. The Jun family will be cut off, and the Yang family will be cut off. Apart from me, no one else knows about this secret. Even Jun Zhantian doesn't know. And you, Brother Wen, entered the palace after the war 3 years ago. The emperor's voice was filled with anger. His voice was filled with powerlessness and humiliation. Jun Moxi is the only grandson of the old lady of Dongfang. He is the only life of the Tianxiang imperial family. Jun Zhantian refused to rebel. So, he finally broke with the Dongfang family. The white chess piece in His Majesty's hand fell on the chessboard with a "pa" sound. Several chess pieces were knocked into a mess. His fingers trembled slightly as he lowered his head in disappointment. Brother Jun had deep feelings for me. Brother Wen, I've let Brother Jun down. He suddenly raised his head and said, I admit it. But I'm an emperor. I am the monarch of a country. The royal family has never had any relatives. The monarch is originally heartless. No matter when, the first thing I think about is always the imperial power. I will always be the future of this country. I will never let anything that could threaten my imperial power continue to exist. And the times when I think about brotherly love are too few. Perhaps this is the greatest sorrow of being an emperor. I'm all alone. Wen Songyu was silent for a long time. Then, he let out a long sigh. So, we can't touch the few people left in the Jun family no matter what. We can't touch them no matter how we look at it. Even if we have a reason to kill them, it must be an accident. A real accident. Moreover, neither we nor anyone from the Tianxiang imperial family is allowed to get involved in this. Otherwise, the Dongfang family will go crazy if we are caught. Brother Wen, the Supreme Forest is no longer the same as it was 10 years ago. Since Yunbi Chen's disappearance, everyone has been on their own. Tianxiang will be in danger if Dongfang comes back. A real accident? If you want someone like Jun Moxie to die in an accident. Mr. Wen sighed, it's difficult. Perhaps it's not that difficult. The emperor smiled with a complicated look in his eyes. Moreover, this accident, this opportunity has come. He slowly took out a letter from his sleeve and put it on the chessboard. The Xian beast tied. Your Majesty, you mean? Wen Songyu's eyes lit up. Then, he sighed heavily. This incident happened in the southern part of Tianxiang. It doesn't involve any other country. But if the Blood Soul faction is defeated, Tianxiang will be the first to suffer. The emperor frowned slightly. He stood up and put his hands behind his back. Therefore, we must send people. And we can't underestimate the manpower we send. Therefore, all the aristocratic families in the capital will send people to form an elite force. Then, they will be given 10,000 cavalrymen. They will go to the south to help. Among these people, the Murong family, the Tang family, the Li family, the Song family, the Jun family. They will all send people. Once these people leave, the capital will basically be much emptier. I can take advantage of this period of time to play with my 3 good sons. By the time they return, I believe that things will have changed, and things will have remained the same, but people will have changed. His Majesty smiled faintly. However, none of the aristocratic families would be willing to submit to such an army. Although this army is strong, but, the emperor's laughter was full of coldness. It was obvious that such an army would not submit to anyone. It was taboo to join the army. If such an army were to fight against the Shen beasts, it would be obvious. It would be a dead end. Your Majesty, who is going to lead the army? Mr. Wen had already guessed it, but he still asked. Jun Wui. His Majesty the Emperor smiled in a strange manner. Is there anyone else more suitable than Jun Wui? A faint cold light flashed in the Emperor's eyes. Jun Wui, I don't know why you organized that auction. But, I will be one step ahead of you. I will stop all your ideas. Pray for your own luck in this trip to Tian Fa. Jun Moxie's face had turned gloomy as soon as he left the imperial palace. His sharp, eagle-like eyes were still fixed on his back. The feeling of pressure didn't go away for a long time. Jun Dashao activated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune and scanned the surroundings with his divine sense. Then, he said in a low voice, Fatty, how many of the herbs I asked you to collect? It's just the beginning. How many do you think we have? Tang Yuan was stunned. It had only been a few days. And, most of the herbs Jun Dashao had asked for were rare and precious. It would be strange if he had a lot of them. Listen, no matter what method you use, you must collect as many herbs as possible in the shortest time possible. The sooner the better. You must advertise widely and with great effort. You must buy the rare herbs at double or triple the price. Also, as long as the 3 special medicinal ingredients that I mentioned appear, no matter how high the price is, you must get them. In short, you must collect a portion of the herbs in the shortest time possible at all costs. Starting tonight, you must send me the herbs 3 times a day. Morning, afternoon, and evening. Even if you only get one, you must send it to me as soon as possible. Do you understand? I understand. I will do my best. Tang Yuan could feel Jun Moxie's urgency. So, he nodded without hesitation. Jun Xia heaved a sigh of relief, and his eyes turned solemn. Then, he turned his head and gazed at the dazzling imperial palace. It seemed as if there was a pair of eyes staring at him. He thought about it for a while and recalled his performance today. Then, he felt relieved. The emperor was suspicious of him. Jun Moxie had been aware of this fact since the last time he was at the aristocratic hall. Moreover, this scholarly autumn festival was only a test. Jun Mo Xia would never be able to change this fact, no matter how arrogant he was or how deliberately he tried to avoid it. Only if Jun Mo Xia was willing to give up his pride and revert to his original Mo Xia's temperament would the situation be temporarily alleviated. However, it would only be temporary. Moreover, it would only make the imperial family even more unscrupulous in dealing with the Jun family. Jun Moxie would rather die than do such a thing. If you have a bird under your leg, you must be a man. Indomitable spirit. Go to hell. These 16 words had become the hitman Jun's motto. Therefore, Jun Moxie had appeared to be a debauchee in the imperial palace's main hall. But, he was actually unscrupulous and arrogant for once. This was because Jun Mo Xia had suddenly thought of something when he had seen Tang Yuan carrying a chair on his back. If the emperor really wanted to deal with the Jun family, then he wouldn't need a reason. Even if Jun Moxie was a debauchee, he would still kill him when the time came. He wouldn't show any mercy. On the contrary, if the emperor didn't want to deal with the Jun family, then nothing would happen to Jun Moxie even if he was a heaven-defying talent. Jun Moxie felt that his worries were groundless. Moreover, the Jun family had a certain level of self-protection now. Solitary Eagle's name as one of the 8 great masters wouldn't lose its effect within a year. As for after a year, Jun Moxie was confident that anyone who wanted to deal with the Jun family would have to pay a disastrous price. Jun Moxie didn't want to delay the Silver Blizzard City's matter for too long. Jun Moxie sighed as he thought of the peak level 9 Xian Dan in his hands. He had the Xian Dan, the people waiting to level up, and even the great masters to help him level up, but he didn't have the Xian Dan, the Hongjun Pagoda, the Flame of Primal Chaos, and the Furnace of Good Fortune were all there, but he didn't have the ingredients for the Xian Dan. The medicine, all the crux of the matter could be summed up in one word. Jun Moxie frowned and sighed. In the past few days, Jun Moxie had memorized all the so-called Dan prescriptions and the corresponding requirements for refining the Xian Dan. However, Jun Moxie found that he could only refine some low-level Xian Dan, and the success rate wasn't very high. The second level of the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune could only refine low-level pills that could increase one's strength or heal injuries. The herbs required weren't particularly precious. At the very least, they weren't rare or hard to find. However, Jun Mo Xia was dissatisfied with the fact that the introduction of this pill stated that it could increase one's strength, but the effect wasn't ideal. At best, it could only increase one's strength by 8 to 10 years. Moreover, it couldn't be taken repeatedly. This made Jun Mo Xia very gloomy, extremely gloomy. This made him feel that the Xian Dan refined from the Hongjun Pagoda wasn't as effective as the Xian Beast's Xian Dan. One had to know that the peak level 9 Xian Dan could increase a person's strength by several levels, and it could even disregard one's original level. How could a mere few years of cultivation compare to the effects of such a technique? There were some bottlenecks that a person might not be able to break through in his entire life. There were also some heights that some people could not reach even in death. Therefore, the number of experts in this world would always be small, absolutely small. This was because Jun Moxie's requirements were too high. At best, he was only at the second level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. Being able to refine these Xian Dan could be said to be heaven-defying. The level 9 Xian Dan was indeed precious, but how many level 9 Xian beasts were there in this world? Even if there were, how many people could easily obtain its inner Dan? One had to know that in the Xian continent since ancient times, there may have been people who had used heaven and earth elixirs to increase their strength, but no one had ever been able to refine such a miraculous Xian Dan that could permanently increase one's strength. Not to mention that it could increase one's strength by 8 to 10 years, even a Xian Dan that could only increase one's strength by 1 year would immediately cause a huge uproar in this world. Not to mention Lord Dashao's almost mass-produced Xian Dan. With the advancement of Jun Moxie's cultivation, the effects of the Xian Dan that he could refine would also increase. A typical well-fed man doesn't know the hunger of a starving man. Jun Zhantian sat on his horse, watching his grandson anxiously instructing something. His expression did not change, but his heart was filled with joy. As for what Jun Moxie's performance today would attract, Jun Zhantian did not care at all. He did not believe that in this Tianxiang city, he would not be able to protect his only grandson. Even if it was in the whole of Tianxiang, so what? Motherfucker, this old man's grandson should be a character who can walk sideways. This is my Jun family. I have to say, scolding those sour fellows made this old man's heart feel great. This is a real man with a bird. Just as Jun Zhantian was feeling pleased with himself, there was a sudden change in front of him. A strange, illusory shadow suddenly appeared under the sunlight, like a shadow wave twisting in midair. With incomparable speed, it appeared from a tree on the side of the road. A ray of light shot straight at Jun Moxie like a bolt of lightning. In the instant that this ray of light appeared, it had already arrived in front of Jun Moxie's chest. The speed of this person's attack was fast, and the timing was accurate. This kind of timing, this kind of speed, even the Tianxian Grandpa Jun did not have time to react. They had just left the imperial palace. At this moment, they actually chose this kind of timing to assassinate him. It was simply too unexpected. Everyone felt as if they were in a dream. They could only stare blankly as that beam of light passed through Jun Moxie's chest. Then, it didn't even turn its head as it continued to move at a miraculous speed. Like a bolt of lightning, it instantly climbed up a big tree on the other side of the street. Then, it swayed for a moment, and disappeared without a trace. Chapter 293. Only at the moment when the assassin climbed up the tree, he seemed to twist his body and look back. But the crowd did not see it clearly, because everyone's eyes were already attracted by Jun Moxie. Even Jun Zhantian's loud roar of "Mo-xia" was only able to form a prelude to the word "mo" before everyone's heart was filled with grief. Even Jun Zhantian's loud roar of "Mo-xia" could only form a prelude to the word "mo" before he shut his mouth. If one did not listen carefully, it would vaguely sound like old man Jun Zhantian shouting "Mom" to the sky. This was because, in everyone's eyes, this person who had been pierced through the chest should have died with blood splattering everywhere. However, in reality, he was riding on the horse perfectly fine. There was not even a drop of blood on his body. He was completely uninjured. Everyone was stunned at once. What is going on? They clearly saw a person pierced through the chest. Why is he? The moment Jun Moxie stepped into this range, his heart had instantly raised a warning sign. In his life as an assassin, his mind had long been honed to be incomparably sensitive. His intuition for danger had allowed him to feel the killing intent on this part of the road. Although Jun Moxie's expression did not change, he was already prepared in his heart. But even so, the speed of this assassin's movement was still somewhat beyond his expectations. Really fast. Almost at the moment when he raised his guard, this person had already turned into a shadow and arrived before his chest. Jun Moxie could even feel the unusually cold temperature of this assassin's sword. The only thing Jun Moxie could see was a pair of cold, seemingly dead eyes, like the eyes of a dead fish, staring at him from Lengleng. Other than that, there was only a gray shadow. This person's speed was so fast that it was already too late to dodge. In the face of absolute speed, all experience, knowledge, and instincts were useless. It was an absolutely fatal strike. At this critical moment, Jun Moxie quickly made a decision in his heart. He had no other choice. He no longer cared whether he was exposed or not. With a swoosh, he immediately escaped into his greatest life-saving trump card, the Hongjun Pagoda. But because this sudden change of events happened too suddenly, there was still an afterimage left on the horse. It looked as if someone had pierced through his chest with a sword. Then, he immediately came out of the Hongjun Pagoda, still sitting on the back of the horse. All of this happened in the blink of an eye, and it was too much for everyone's eyes to take in. But who would suspect that Jun Moxie actually had such a mysterious life-saving method? Right at this moment, the crowd exclaimed once more. A streak of dark yellow light followed the path of the man's attack along the tree that he had just been perched on and shot out like a dragon. Jun Zhantian was already standing in front of his grandson. His body glowed with blue light, and it was obvious that he had pushed his cultivation to the limit. Then, he suddenly punched. His fist tore through the air, producing a thunderous sound. It was clear that the old master had used all his strength in this punch. However, this all-out attack hit nothing but air. This menacing yellow light dissipated upon contact, disappearing without a trace. There was actually no power within it. This is an afterimage. Jun Moxie, who was behind him, said slowly. Watching the yellow light slowly dissipate, Jun Moxie's face was full of solemnity. This man's Xian Qi cultivation could not be considered very high, only at the peak of the Earth Xian realm. But his speed was extremely strange. Jun Moxie did not doubt that even the famous solitary eagle would only be able to match this man's speed if he exerted his full strength. He was actually able to leave the Xian Qi light emitted from his body behind. What kind of terrifying speed was this? How could a peak of the Earth Xian realm possess such a supreme level of speed? Not to mention Jun Moxie, almost everyone around him, who was an expert, could not figure it out either. How could there be someone in this world with such a speed? Seeing that everyone was on high alert, Jun Moxie smiled faintly and said, "Don't worry, with such a terrifying speed, I believe this man can only make one attack. If he can do it continuously, then wouldn't he be even more powerful than Yunbi Chen?" Everyone suddenly came to a realization. Such a terrifying attack speed was indeed terrifying, but it should not be continuous. But in this world, there were very few people who could block this attack. Even if Tian Xian was at his peak, he would be seriously injured if he were to face this attack. Even if he did not die, he would be seriously injured. How did Jun Moxie dodge it? What everyone did not know was that right now, Jun Moxie's entire body was covered in layers of cold sweat. He was filled with lingering fear. Such a lightning-like attack of death. Even in Jun Moxie's previous life, he had never seen such a thing. Even Jun Moxie, who was a peerless assassin, could not match up to it. This kind of speed had truly surpassed the limit of what the human body could achieve. This was not to say that no one could achieve such a speed. If it was someone as strong as Master Shen Xian, then it would not be surprising. For example, if the solitary eagle were to use his full strength, he would also be able to achieve such speed, or even surpass it. But for this speed to suddenly appear on a person who only had the strength of an Earth Xian, it truly surpassed the limits of the human body. Jun Moxie had always been very conceited, confident enough to look down on all the heroes of the world. Apart from the fact that his cultivation was limited by his age, he was also very proud of his own speed and reflexes. In his previous life, he had once dodged a bullet fired from a sniper rifle from a distance of 10 meters, and was completely unharmed. Even in this life, with the help of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, his control over speed had not regressed. But this time, he was actually unable to dodge that thunderous attack. Didn't this mean that this person's attack speed had already surpassed the roaring bullet of a sniper rifle? One must know that the speed of a sniper rifle's bullet was 900 meters per second. That speed was close to 3 times the speed of sound. Jun Moxie's heart was filled with shock. Even though he had safely dodged that thunderous attack, he was still drenched in sweat, and his clothes were drenched in sweat. Although in his previous life, he had been completely focused, and his feet were on the ground, and he was riding a horse now, the difference was not small. But this person's speed was truly terrifying. Suddenly, an idea flashed through Jun Moxie's mind. An Earth Xian's speed is absolutely impossible to reach such a level of speed, unless it's similar to Hai Chen Feng's unique skill of self-destruction. Or perhaps it's similar to the great art of demonic disintegration from my previous life. Only then would it be possible to reach such a level of speed in a split second. If this was the case, then the previous assassin must have been very weak at this time, and it was not impossible to say that he had sustained severe injuries. Jun Moxie looked in the direction that the assassin had left, and his eyes gradually became sharp. This person is too dangerous. Fortunately, there were no casualties in such an unexpected assassination attempt. Everyone became even more cautious on the road. Tang Yuan simply left the group halfway, and hurried back to the aristocratic hall to collect the medicinal ingredients. Jun Zhantian couldn't help but ask his grandson when he saw the Jun family's main gate, "Xia, how did you dodge that attack?" Grandpa Jun had been holding back this question for a long time. He had asked himself, "I don't think I could have evaded that attack. Even I couldn't evade it. So, how did my precious grandson manage to do so?" Jun Moxie admittedly had remarkable abilities, but strength was something that required a lot of time to cultivate. There were no shortcuts. This was the most puzzling point for Grandpa Jun. Jun Moxie smiled faintly, looked at his grandfather, and earnestly said, "Grandpa, you can rest assured. As long as your grandson doesn't want to die, no one can kill me. Even the 8 great masters wouldn't be able to harm a single hair on my body. I'm incomparably confident about this." Ah! Jun Zhantian was shocked on the spot. This boasting is a bit too outrageous, isn't it? Grandpa, this concerns your grandson's biggest secret. Jun Moxie found this somewhat funny, and blinked his eyes. It's the last resort that can save one's life under any circumstances. You don't want me to expose it, do you? So that's how it is. Grandpa Jun let out a long sigh of relief. After the initial shock, he beamed with joy. He no longer asked what this secret was all about. Grandpa Jun was old and experienced. How could he not know that there were some secrets that could only be kept in one's heart? The more people that knew about it, the higher the risk of it being exposed. As long as he knew that his grandson had such a method, then he wouldn't ask for anything else. Xia, if such a thing really exists, then consider it your life's biggest secret. Grandpa Jun looked at his grandson with a relieved expression, and exhorted, "Even if you find a wife in the future, don't tell her. Just keep it to yourself. That's your biggest trump card. Only with a secret can you have a trump card. When a secret is no longer a secret, a trump card is no longer a trump card." "Grandpa, don't worry. I understand." Jun Moxie was somewhat moved. Grandpa Jun's unreserved love and care for him was something he had never experienced in his 2 lives. This time, His Majesty will certainly mobilize his troops. In the Jun residence's main hall, Jun Wui, who didn't attend the scholarly autumn banquet, listened to the grandfather and grandson's narration. Then, he slowly said in a tone that made it impossible to guess wrongly, "Moreover, His Majesty will summon a general this time. Otherwise, even if the sky were to collapse, His Majesty wouldn't have lost his voice at that moment." Grandpa Jun nodded with a heavy expression, but didn't say anything. Ever since Jun Wui had recovered and succeeded as the family head, Grandpa Jun had never spoken out about the family's decisions. He had always tried his best to let Jun Wui shoulder the family's heavy responsibilities by himself. Grandpa Jun would only participate in the family's matters if there was something he couldn't handle or if there was an unexpected omission. Even if he did participate, he would only touch on the surface and stop there. He would never interfere too much. "It seems that I will have to make preparations." Jun Wui chuckled. His eyes glowed with the desire to fight, and a long-lost aura of war appeared on his body. Why? Jun Moxie was smart and vigilant, but he still couldn't understand why Jun Wui would have to make preparations if the emperor wanted to mobilize his troops. The news of Jun Wui's recovery was only known to a few people. In the eyes of the world, the third master Jun was still a disabled person. In fact, this golden scholarly feast can't be considered as a scholarly feast in the strictest sense. Jun Wui sneered and said, "This feast is for you, Jun Moxie. The duration is short, the number of events is few, and you're the main target. You'll only be able to accept the humiliation if you don't. Otherwise, you'll be exposed no matter how you perform. You wrote a poem and a couplet. Even though they're crude, you were able to come up with them in such a short period of time. That's a sign of talent. The golden scholarly feast was over after you answered. Moreover, His Majesty had personally stopped it. This means that he has already achieved his goal. This is the conclusion." Jun Wui smiled deeply. "Xia, you haven't experienced the strife of the imperial court. The imperial court has been in a much more chaotic situation than today's. Why didn't His Majesty show such impatience? Therefore, I'm certain that His Majesty's objective for this golden scholarly feast is our June family. Since it's the June family, and Emosia has shown some clues, His Majesty's suspicious nature will naturally think, why? He will never think that we're doing this to protect ourselves from his suspicions. He will only think of one thing, enduring so patiently, he must be plotting something big. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. Grandpa June let out a deep sigh and turned his head away. It seemed as if he didn't want to listen anymore. In fact, what June Wui had said was something that Grandpa June had already thought of. He hadn't mentioned it before because he was holding on to a contingency plan. But now, his hopes had been dashed. So, he didn't want to say anything. They had been brothers for decades. Yet, they were plotting against their own family. How could they endure this? His Majesty has always been suspicious and cautious. I believe that he won't immediately take action. Therefore, he'll gradually weaken our June family's strength. And, I'll be the first to bear the brunt of it. The Xian beast tied in the southern heaven city will provide him with the perfect excuse. Therefore, this time, it's my turn, Jun Wui said indifferently. His eyes emitted a sharp and cold light. It was profound and breathtaking. Jun Moxie sneered and said, if he really thinks so, then he's gravely mistaken. Third uncle, if you really go to war this time, I'll go with you. The Tian Fa forest is an excellent place for me and our Jun family. Jun Wui narrowed his eyes and said, you're going too. I'm afraid that you won't be able to go even if you don't want to. My only worry now is. He looked at his father and said, if Emo Xia and I are dispatched to the south, and you're alone at home. Jun Zhantian laughed and said, my son, you don't need to worry about this. He won't act rashly before our Jun family loses its power. Otherwise, why would he use you as a test? Jun Wui patted his head, I didn't think of this. Jun Moxie smiled, third uncle is too worried and confused. It's not that he didn't think of this. The three of them had come to a decision. Now, all that was left was to deal with changes by remaining unchanged. The three of them also felt that this matter was not a big deal. Especially for young Master Jun. What was there to be worried about when faced with an unforeseen event that was already in his grasp? Emo Xia, don't you think you should think about it for a while? The training of the 300-strong guards should be relaxed for a while. They're already very tired from the high-intensity training every day. More haste makes waste. Jun Wui had a serious expression on his face as he raised this matter. Jun Moxie was startled. He became silent and slowly said, I understand third uncle's concerns. But the intensity of their training is still far from what I want. I will only strengthen it step by step. I won't relax them even a little bit. The ones who can endure it are the ones with the strongest combat power I want. Jun Wui was stunned. That inhumane training still needs to be strengthened. If this group of people were placed on the battlefield, any one of them could become a standard killing machine. How could he say that it was still far from what he wanted? Just what kind of freaks was his nephew trying to train? And, could those soldiers really endure it? On the field, there were 100 people divided into two teams fighting against each other. All of them were sweating profusely. Ever since he had returned from the outskirts of Tian Fa Forest, Jun Emo Xia had come up with a training program that was twice as intense as the original. He had been training day and night without rest, 24 hours a day. In fact, Jun Emo Xia's timing had been precise down to the second. Now, all of them had extra sandbags tied to their legs and arms. Even when they were eating or sleeping, they were not allowed to take them off. Every day's combat training was a direct battle of life and death. If there was an outsider here, he or she would be shocked. This was no longer like a fight between humans, nor was it like a training between soldiers. Instead, it was like a group of wild beasts, crazily biting each other. Everyone's eyes were filled with an ominous glint. Their murderous aura was awe-inspiring. It was as if they were facing an irreconcilable mortal enemy. After an entire afternoon of brutal combat training, the Xian Qi cultivation within their bodies had been completely used up in the time it took to burn a stick of incense. At present, they were only relying on their body's instincts. They were completely using their physical strength to hit and endure the other party's attacks. The June residence's huge field was unexpectedly not even a speck of dust could be seen. During this period of training, every inch of the field had been soaked in sweat and blood thousands of times. Bodies were constantly smashed into the ground, creating human-shaped holes. Then, large holes were smashed into the ground one after another, and then flattened. Up until now, only a small mark could be made on the ground with a hammer. The entire field had turned into an oily color. What a terrifying scene. By the time June Moxie arrived, the battle had clearly reached a white-hot stage. In fact, no one had much strength left in the confrontation. One of the burly men roared as he pounced on the other, fiercely punching and kicking. That burly man neither dodged nor gave way. Two bangs resounded as he took the blows head-on. Then, he similarly punched and kicked. Both of them fell back at the same time with a loud bang. Then, they got up at the same time and fought fiercely again. It was like two rhinoceroses fiercely colliding with each other. The June residence's pond had turned dark at this moment. There were dozens of huge iron pots on the side. They were constantly boiling and boiling medicinal herbs. People were constantly pouring the boiled medicinal water into the pond. Then, they would add more water and continue to steam. Nearly 100 big men were soaking naked in the pond. Their eyes were closed, and their faces were solemn. Naturally, they weren't bathing. Instead, they were undergoing another kind of training. During this period of time, June Moxie had thrown a large amount of medicinal herbs into the pond every day. The entire pond would be changed once every 3 days. These big men would jump into the pond and soak their bodies in it after their daily training. They would absorb the medicinal herbs and recover from their fatigue. The reason why this was considered another kind of training was because the temperature of the hot water in the pond was close to boiling. If their bodies hadn't reached a certain level, they would have been cooked if they stayed for a while. It was also because this medicinal water contained a large amount of precious medicinal herbs. Not only did it dispel the soldiers' fatigue, but it also nourished and conditioned the soldiers' bodies. This allowed them to withstand such harsh training. Of course, they had to pay a corresponding price for using such good water. Even the task of changing the water was done by them. Moreover, they weren't allowed to take up the training time. June Moxie's training methods couldn't even be described with the word cruel. Even Jun Wuyi, who had always been a strict commander, felt that June Moxie's training methods were somewhat cruel and inhumane. June Moxie was hidden at the side. He was carefully observing each and every one of them. During this period of time, he would change the intensity of training almost every day. These big men would be surprised to find that the intensity of training that they had adapted to yesterday was no longer able to withstand today's training limit. There was a limit at every moment. As for their current training, every moment of every day, they were surpassing their limits. The strength of their bodies would rise a little every day or two, and the profound energy in their bodies would increase a little every few days. Even though it might not be very obvious, it was an abnormally real increase. Such a speed of improvement was simply shocking. The Xian Qi in their bodies wasn't very high. The strongest among them was only at the pinnacle of the Gold Xian realm. In fact, most of them were stuck at the Silver Xian realm. However, the strength of their bodies had reached a terrifying level. A little further away, a row of 50 big men stood at the foot of the wall in a horse stance. Their eyes were closed. Beside each of them, there was another person holding a thick wooden stick. They were gnashing their teeth and swinging it with all their might. The wooden stick carried a sharp sound as it hit every part of their bodies. It was as if the wooden stick was slapped on cowhide. However, they didn't seem to be in pain. At most, their faces would twitch a little, or their brows would furrow. Other than that, they didn't have any other reaction. Their bodies were still standing firm and strong. After each of them had been slapped over 100 times, they finally breathed out heavily. They stopped their horse stance and twisted their necks to move their wrists and ankles. Suddenly, a series of violent slapping sounds could be heard. It was as if firecrackers had been set off. Then, they picked up their wooden sticks. The 50 men who were originally responsible for beating the men stood at the position of the men who were beaten. They closed their eyes, got into a horse stance, and lowered their hands. The muscles on their bodies immediately tensed up. Whistling sounds could be heard again. However, the positions of the men who were beaten and the men who were beaten had changed. After the two teams had finished taking turns to beat the men, an order was given. The 100 men were divided into two groups and entered the field. The 100 men who had been fighting desperately on the field also lined up neatly under the order. Everyone was panting heavily as they moved neatly towards the foot of the wall. Then, they would either beat the men or be beaten. Under the command, these 100 people started a terrifying brawl without any hesitation. Every punch and every kick was aimed at the vital points: the chest, the throat, the temple, the back of the head, the genitals, the knees, and all the other joints. One could imagine how tragic the situation would be if one of them could not block the attacks. However, these burly men were all used to it. They accurately blocked their opponent's attacks and looked for any possible gap to attack the opponent in front of them. Even if they were hit, they would try their best to maintain their position where their skin was thick and their flesh was unimportant. Occasionally, someone would be punched in the nose by his opponent, causing blood to flow. However, regardless of whether it was his opponent or himself, their expressions did not change. Their gazes were cold. It was as if the ones who were bleeding were not themselves or their comrades, but the enemies. With a whistling sound, nearly 100 men in the pool stood up at the same time. They put on their clothes and lined up on the shore. Everyone in the field stopped fighting at the same time. They took off their clothes and entered the pool in an orderly manner. As for those who had just come ashore, they began an even crueler sparring session. This time, it was not one-on-one. Instead, it was a crazy fight between two teams without a target. It was either one against several, or several against one. At this moment, they were still being attacked by several people. In the next moment, they had joined the ranks of several people attacking others. The scene was chaotic and indescribable. From time to time, a man could be seen being kicked in the chest or stomach. Then, he flew out and crashed into several people. However, in the next moment, he would rush back in with vigor and fight crazily. Throughout the entire process, apart from the loud shouts of orders, there were only the sounds of rough fighting. Not a single person spoke. When they spoke, they used another method. They used their fists, feet, elbows, and even shoulders. The three groups of people went through each other's training again and again. This was only the training during the day. At night, apart from cultivating profound energy, the other training was even crueler than the training during the day, because that was the training of weapons. Everyone gritted their teeth, risked their lives, and used all their souls to accept the training. In their minds, there was only one thing that was very clear: they must reach the standards of the young master. Because the young master had said that the assessment was getting closer and closer. When the time came, those who did not pass the assessment would be kicked out. They would continue to do the work of guarding the house and cooking. After tasting the sweetness of rapid progress and seeing the clear hope of becoming a strong person, no one was willing to go back to the decadent life of the past. That was a disgrace. This team of steel, after going through the test of death like a phoenix rising from the ashes, was finally about to take shape. Chapter 294. Still 2 chapters in one, 7,000 words. Seeking recommendation votes. Jun Moxie stood quietly as he watched the cruel training. His eyes were cold and ruthless. What he wanted was not just this. Only when the strength of these people's bodies reached their respective limits, when his batch of pills came out, would they be able to display the greatest effect. Let them improve in one fell swoop. In the future, Jun Moxie's main task for this team was to kill. Kill. Unceasing killing. Never-ending killing. In the middle of the Jun residence, Jun Zhantian and Jun Wui stood side by side on top of the tall tower. Their eyebrows twitched as they watched the cruel training below. Wu Yi, what do you think Mo Xia wants to do by training these people? Is there a need to train them in such a manner? Jun Zhantian's eyes were solemn. If it was a normal soldier, this kind of training would undoubtedly be buying lives. Even if it was to train an undefeatable army, it would still be a bit excessive. However, from what I see, Mo Xia only has one goal in training this army: slaughter. Jun Wuyi's gaze was somewhat covetous. But, it was no wonder that any general would be envious of such a troop. That would be a strange thing. This kind of troop was the dream troop of any general. In any army, even if there were only 100 of them, let alone 300 of them, they would still be an invincible flood. He would be invincible on the battlefield and invincible in his attacks. Any enemy's nightmare. Kill. Jun Zhantian's eyes flashed with a trace of worry. Even if it is killing, it also depends on who they are killing for, why they are killing, and the purpose and original intention of killing. This is very important for the world, for the country, for the people, and for themselves. Father, this child does not agree with you. This child feels that no matter what, these people will only fight for one person. Jun Wuyi's eyes were cold. These 300 people will only fight for Mo Xia. For Mo Xia, and for the Jun family. Because the future of the Jun family lies in the hands of Mo Xia. Is it really important for the world, for the country, for the people? This kind of power. The old man was still worried. Once it appears in front of people, it will inevitably arouse suspicion. Suspicion? So what? Jun Wuyi narrowed his eyes, and a sharp, cold light flashed in his eyes. When has the Jun family not been feared by others? Isn't what our Jun family has done and endured not enough? Jun Wuyi's words were close to Jun Moxi's way of thinking. It was quite disrespectful. The old man let out a long sigh and remained silent. Were some of the choices he had made back then really correct? The Jun family's talents are withering. Should I also bear some responsibility? The Jun family will rise again with Mo Xia. He would no longer be hindered by anyone or any force. I'm incomparably confident of this. Jun Wuyi slowly turned his head, and looked at the fierce fight in the courtyard. Then, he slowly said, but this still requires time and strength. Absolute strength is needed. And now, we already have the embryonic form of absolute strength. He slowly clenched his fists, and his knuckles creaked. Didn't that brat Mo Xia say that he wanted to watch their training? Why is he nowhere to be seen? Grandpa Jun looked around. The training of these people no longer requires anyone's supervision. Jun Wuyi's eyes revealed a look of admiration. Training soldiers to this point is already at the peak of perfection. As for Mo Xia, I don't know what he's up to. That brat has always been very mysterious. Let's not care about him. Caring about him will only make things more troublesome. Not caring about him will save us a lot of trouble. In any case, he is now a hidden dragon. Father, let go of him. The old man snorted and said, don't care. Don't worry. You're thinking too much. Don't you think that as an uncle, you're not doing enough? Mo Xia is not young anymore. Don't you know that you should be concerned about Mo Xia's marriage? How come I don't know that Mo Xia has grown up and should be getting married? Didn't you see it with your own eyes? Right, that brat's capital is not bad, right? Third Master Jun suddenly asked. It's really not bad. It's very similar to this old man's demeanor in the past. Bah! What are you talking about? Are you asking for a beating? Grandpa Jun suddenly came to his senses and raised his hand to teach Jun Wuyi a lesson. Third Master Jun chuckled. Father, why are you so angry? Mo Xia has grown up. Are you not happy? However, the matter of marriage should be considered at length. Of course, if you think that you can force Mo Xia to do something that he doesn't want to do, I have no objections. On the contrary, I will be happy to see it happen. In the face of his son's counterattack, Grandpa Jun became angry. Grandpa Jun was infuriated. However, when he thought about it, his precious grandson might not even be able to force him to do such a small thing, let alone suddenly asking him to get married. That Duga girl is very good to Emosia. I can see that Emosia is also interested in her. Apart from that, is there anything else? That girl might not be able to stand up to Emosia. Grandpa June was unwilling to give up and asked. This sanctimonious and unscrupulous pair of father and son had begun to construct a harem for their nephew and grandson. Apart from that, didn't he often go to the Spirit Fog Lake? Maybe there. June Wooey blinked. Grandpa June almost fainted. He held his forehead with one hand. Forget about those. Is there anything else? I remember that Imo Xia was very ambitious towards his sister-in-law, Qing Han. Jun Wooey broke the window with a schwa sound after he had spoken these words. Then, he flew away, and disappeared without a trace. He knew what awaited him if he stayed. Bastard! Get out of here! Grandpa June flew into a rage. He wanted to continue his outburst, but he found that his son had disappeared without a trace. He could not help but stare, stomp his feet, and roar all the way down the stairs. But halfway through his roar, he frowned thoughtfully. Does our June family have to delay him for the rest of his life? Grandpa June sighed and shook his head. Ridiculous! Ridiculous! He did not know what the old man was talking about. June Moxie could faintly hear Grandpa June's roar from the side of the sports field. He could not help but feel confused. What's wrong with Grandpa June? Why did he suddenly get angry? June Dashawan naturally did not know that Grandpa June's anger was completely provoked by him. Even though he was innocent, his body flashed and June Moxie's shadow disappeared from the side of the sports field. Seeing that the sky was getting dark, June Moxie's heart was filled with a faint anticipation. There were many things to be done tonight. First, the thing that Xiao Feng Wu was wearing was a good thing. How could it be ordinary if it could trigger a reaction from the Hongjun Pagoda? June Dashao did not know what that thing was. But regardless of whether he knew or not, he had already made up his mind to snatch it back. Secondly, June Moxie was very interested in the assassin who tried to assassinate him. Moreover, June Moxie liked the assassin's way of doing things. In fact, he approved of it. He would never fight head-on. He would never turn back if he missed his target. Instead, he would immediately run away without any hesitation. This was June Moxie's way of doing things in his previous life. This was the true meaning of an assassin that June Moxie had seen in this world. In June Moxie's eyes, those assassin organizations and the like were just ordinary Shen cultivators who liked to fight. Where was the demeanor of an assassin? Those people didn't deserve to be called assassins. In addition to that, there was also that extremely fast killer move. June Moxie was confident that his lethality would increase by several levels if he could get his hands on that divine skill. In fact, he could even try to kill his opponent if it was Shenxian's people. There must be a profound mystery behind it. June Moxie was startled as he approached his courtyard. He stopped his chaotic train of thoughts, and his figure also stopped moving forward. Two small figures were kneeling at the entrance of his courtyard. It was hard to tell how long they had been kneeling there. Their backs were thin and frail. But they exuded a stubborn aura that would never admit defeat. June Moxie sighed. Then, his figure appeared like a ghost, and slowly walked over. June Wu-yi and June Imo Xia had rescued these two youngsters from the Huanghua Hall. The rest of the youngsters had already been settled down. But, these two kids hadn't left. They had insisted on learning their skills, and taking revenge for their deaths. But, these two people weren't seriously injured. But, they were mute. Their tongues had been cut in half. So, it was impossible for them to speak. Moreover, one of them only had one arm. It wasn't that June Moxie hadn't been tempted. But, he had reluctantly refused after he had examined these two people. These two children had astonishing perseverance. Their hatred was also in place. But, their aptitude was mediocre. What's more, both of them were now disabled. The Huanghua Hall hadn't given up on training them for no reason. Jun Moxie had seriously considered all aspects. If he were to wholeheartedly train these two children, then, with their tenacious perseverance, coupled with his own cruel training and guidance, they would be able to endure the baptism of time. Then, they would have considerable achievements. In fact, they might even have the opportunity to reach the Earth Xian realm in this lifetime. An Earth Xian expert, this achievement couldn't be said to be low. In fact, it was an achievement that ordinary people would find difficult to achieve in their lifetime. And, it was a height that ordinary people and forces would have to look up to. But, it was completely meaningless for these two children and Jun Moxie. First of all, how could Jun Moxie afford to wait? Not to mention that he would have to spend a huge amount of money, medicine, and time on them. If he could only obtain 2 Earth Xian experts, then he would have to spend a long time to train them. So, there was no need to train them. And, there was no value in training them either. Moreover, they yearned for the power of vengeance. But, it wasn't something that could be cultivated in a short period of time. So, everything would be meaningless. Although Jun Moxie sympathized with them and secretly admired their perseverance, he clearly understood that it was impossible. But, these two children had been kneeling here every day ever since they were rejected by him. Whenever they saw Jun Moxie, even though they couldn't speak, their eyes were full of pleading. Today was already the 9th day that they had been kneeling. Hearing the familiar footsteps of Jun Moxie, the two thin and weak bodies trembled. Then, they straightened their backs even more. But, they remained kneeling, and didn't move an inch. Sighing, Jun Moxie slowly walked in front of them. "Raise your heads and look at me." His voice carried an inviolable command. The two youths' bodies trembled. They raised their heads and looked at Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie was startled. The eyes of these two children, who were at most 13 or 14 years old, no longer had the urgency and desire from a few days ago. Instead, it was a deathly stillness. But, it wasn't an empty deathly stillness. Instead, it was a kind of deathly stillness that disregarded life and death. It was a deathly stillness that disregarded everything in the world. Deathly stillness, but definitely not empty. Jun Moxie sighed in his heart. This was the gaze of a top-notch killer. After being oppressed to the extreme, it transformed into a gaze that regarded human life as nothing more than grass. Even to the extent that they regarded themselves as nothing more than grass. If their aptitude was just a little bit stronger, as long as it was a little bit stronger, Jun Moxie wouldn't hesitate to accept them. But, unfortunately, their innate aptitude was too inferior. To become a talent, one needed 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. But the 1% inspiration was the most important. It was even more important than the 99% perspiration. Tell me your reasons. Let me see how determined you are. Jun Moxie felt a sense of pity in his heart. These two children had been rescued from those jars. The suffering they had suffered was absolutely unimaginable to ordinary people. But, it was precisely these two people who were filled with hatred, but had no aptitude for martial arts. This made Jun Moxie couldn't help but sigh for them. Determination? The two of them looked at each other. Then, they nodded at the same time. The child on the left suddenly put the index finger of his left hand into his mouth. He bit it ferociously. His small head moved to one side, and a big piece of flesh was torn off. Blood gushed out. His whole body trembled in pain. His face turned pale, but his body remained motionless. He stretched out his finger, and wrote a word on the ground with his blood. Halfway through writing, the flow of blood gradually slowed down. He looked at it with dissatisfaction. Then, he raised his finger, put it into his mouth, and bit it with all his might. Then, he pulled it hard again. A crisp sound was heard. A short finger bone was forcibly pulled out. The white powder was thrown on the ground. Blood spurted out like a fountain. The blood spurted far away, and some of it splashed onto Jun Moxie's face. And the other child did the same action. Their small bodies trembled, but they managed to control themselves. Using the blood that gushed out, they wrote 8 large words on the ground. The child on the left wrote, "Even if I die, I won't regret it." The child on the right wrote, "If I don't become strong, only death awaits." 16 bloody words. Each word was full and powerful. Although it was crooked, every stroke and stroke was done with such force and meticulous care. After writing, the 2 children kneeled on the ground and kowtowed to June Moxie. June Moxie's eyes suddenly turned blood red. At this moment, June Emosia strangely felt his heart tremble fiercely for a moment. The evil prince, who had lived 2 lives, had always thought of himself as cold-blooded and indifferent. The heavenly Tao was heartless, treating all living things as straw dogs. He was also heartless, treating common people as if they were nothing. Even when he saw that inhumane scene in Huanghua Hall, he didn't feel the slightest tremble in his heart. But now, these 2 stubborn youngsters had deeply moved him. "Good. Since you have such intentions, I won't be stingy to give you a chance." June Moxie took a deep breath and the blood in his eyes gradually faded. He said in a deep voice, "Today, I will give you a chance to dominate the world in the future. But you must remember, this is also a path of death filled with endless killing intent. I hope you don't let me down." The 2 children raised their heads at the same time. They couldn't speak, but their eyes emitted extreme ecstasy. In an instant, the ecstasy turned into incomparable determination. It was as if they had used all their souls to make a decision. At the same time, they kowtowed to June Moxie. Their foreheads split open and blood splattered. June Emosia picked up the 2 people, and rushed through the door at lightning speed. The 2 youngsters had suffered so much pain. Although they didn't make a sound, if they weren't treated in time, there would definitely be problems. Very big problems. Since June Moxie had promised to help them, he would never allow any accidents to happen to them. With such perseverance and ruthlessness, even if their aptitude wasn't good, couldn't it make up for it? There were many people with good aptitude in the world, but how many people could have such perseverance and ruthlessness? Without enough effort, it didn't matter how talented you were. If one could be so ruthless to himself, what about to his enemies? At the entrance of the small courtyard, the 16 bloody words shone brightly under the last ray of light between heaven and earth. Cut into 1,000 pieces, no regrets until death. If you don't become strong, only death awaits. The curtain of night fell with a loud rumble. Looking at the 2 thin and weak figures on his bed, June Moxie frowned and thought hard. Now, the place where June Moxie lived was completely filled with injured people. The strong smell of medicine filled the air. On the big bed on one side, Yi Gahan was lying there calmly. His breathing was still weak, but his life was no longer in danger. On the other side, the other bed that June Emosia had tidied up was occupied by those 2 little fellows again, 3 injured people, 3 disabled people. June Emosia had finally agreed to their request. So, the 2 youngsters couldn't hold on any longer, and fainted. But even when they fainted, they still didn't make a sound. They didn't even groan. He had seen ruthless people, but this was the first time that June Moxie had seen someone who didn't even have the slightest martial arts foundation to be so ruthless to themselves. These 2 little devils were even more ruthless than him. Since he had promised them, how could he train them in the shortest amount of time? This was the thing that June Moxie couldn't decide on the most. Using Xian Qi. This method definitely wouldn't work. If they had the aptitude to cultivate Xian Qi, they wouldn't have been stuffed into a big jar by the people of Huanghua Hall. Forget it. June Emosia fiercely stood up. His eyes suddenly emitted a fierce and ominous glint. If worst comes to worst, I'll make an exception and teach them the techniques of my previous life. They'll practice according to the standards of my past life. As for how far they can go, that will depend on their luck. If they can quickly ascend to the 4th level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, they can also refine the cleansing marrow pill. Let me personally create 2 ultimate killing gods that will shock the entire Xian continent in the future. With this kind of ruthlessness, this kind of willpower, in addition to my cultivation method and elixirs, even if I have to forcefully pile them up, I will definitely create two terrifying fiends. Quietly walking out of the door, June Moxie sat on the threshold and looked up at the night sky. His thoughts wandered. It had been a long time since he had crossed over, but tonight, these two stubborn youngsters had brought up his worries. In his previous life, wasn't he the same as these two children? Risking his life to train and destroying himself. How many times had he gone into shock from training? How many times had he trained himself to the brink of death, constantly spinning around? How did the unparalleled reputation of the evil monarch come about? Who knew how much effort, sweat, blood, and tears were hidden behind this prestige? Among the disciples of the same sect, other than himself, even the most hard-working one had the confidence that his training load would be 3 times more than his. If a man wanted to succeed, if he wanted to achieve unparalleled fame, then he had to be ruthless to himself. Being ruthless to the enemy was nothing. Being ruthless to himself was the true ruthlessness. Disregarding one's own life, that was the true pinnacle of assassins. Only then could one be truly successful in every endeavor. Any worries in one's heart were all obstacles. These were the words of his master in his previous life. A face floated in front of June Moxie's mind. A face as black as iron and as cold as ice. The murderous aura in his eyes seemed to condense into a substance. But it was this pair of eyes that always gave him a sense of relief every time he looked at him. Although he tried his best to conceal it, June Moxie could clearly feel it every time. Now, this pair of eyes seemed to have traversed through 2 different worlds and was looking at him from afar. It was as cold as ever, but with a hint of peace. Master. June Moxie sadly lowered his head and hugged his knees, motionless. A trace of light seeped out from the crack of the door, elongating his shadow. In the night wind, his figure somewhat shrank, somewhat lonely, desolate. Experts, were they really so worthy of people's yearning? Soft footsteps sounded behind him, and then a warm coat was draped over his body. June Moxie still did not move. Suddenly, he asked, "Kuer, tell me, do you want to become an expert?" "Ah!" Little Lolita exclaimed in a low voice. She was obviously very surprised. "Expert? What's the use of that? What's the use of that?" It's a very interesting question. As long as you become an expert like Old Eagle, you can kill whoever you want and roam the world freely for the rest of your life. Are you willing to do that? June Moxie said in a deep voice. Kuer came to his side and quietly sat down next to him. She slightly tilted her head and rested her cheeks on her hands. She looked at the moon in the sky and began to think seriously. The moonlight shone on her face, adding a gentle and beautiful hue. After a long while, Kuer shyly smiled and said, "Expert. I don't want to become that kind of expert." "Oh? Why?" June Moxie slightly tilted his head and looked at the little girl. Kuer's words had really surprised him. Hitman June knew that as long as anyone had the opportunity to become an expert, he would at least give a verbal answer regardless of whether or not he could achieve it in the future. Kuer shyly lowered her head and gently bit her fingernails. "Young master, I don't know what it feels like to become an expert, but I really don't want to. Maybe it's very glorious, and I can enjoy the attention and praise of millions of people, but I don't know what to say. But I'm just a little girl, young master's little girl. I only hope that I can serve young master for the rest of my life. I want to see young master wear the clothes I wash every day. I want to see young master eat the food I make every day. I want to wait for him to come home. I just want to be an ordinary woman." Kuer shyly smiled after she finished speaking. "Young master, I'm saying this, isn't it very unambitious? But I really don't want to become an expert." "No. What you said is very good. This kind of Kuer is the most adorable little girl I like the most." June Moxie carefully sized up the little girl beside him for the first time. Under the soft moonlight, Kuer's skin was delicate and white. A few strands of her soft hair were fluttering in the wind. Her long eyelashes were fluttering restlessly, and there seemed to be some fine hair sticking to her ears. The little girl felt restless under June Moxie's gaze. She awkwardly twisted her fingers, and pretended not to see anything. But, her heart was thumping wildly, and her pretty face slowly turned red. She slowly lowered her head, and felt as if there was a small deer in her heart. June Moxie gave an amused smile, and his mind suddenly felt exceptionally relaxed. With such a lovely little girl by his side, June Moxie's heart felt very peaceful. In fact, he even felt a small but heartfelt happiness. Everyone has their own way of living, and this can't be forced. Just like this little girl, her dream was very simple, but it was also very practical. Moreover, it was also very warm. He gently stroked her beautiful hair, and said, "It's late, you should go back to your room and sleep." June Moxie was surprised to find that his voice was actually very gentle. It was as if he was talking to the little junior sisters who had just entered the sect in his previous life, and Kuer meekly lowered her head, and responded. She slowly stood up, and felt as if her cheeks were burning. Her whole body felt weak, and she slowly walked towards her room. After walking 2 steps, she suddenly remembered something, and turned her head to say, "Young master, you should also rest early, eh?" She turned her head, and realized that June Moxie, who was just beside her a moment ago, had disappeared without a trace. So fast. The little girl bit her lips, and smiled shyly. She pursed her lips, and suddenly remembered that morning. She couldn't help but cover her face. "What am I thinking?" June Moxie faced the night wind, and flew at a high speed. He felt that the art of unlocking heaven's fortune was spontaneously operating within his body. Each cycle brought him a powerful source of power, and with an unstoppable momentum, it flowed through his meridians, and he felt incomparably comfortable. The magnificent jewel hall was right in front of him. June Xia deliberately restrained his aura, and silently floated in. Then, he disappeared underground in an instant. His spirit sense penetrated every inch of the ground after he had sunk into the ground. Then, he slowly spread it outwards. June Moxie hadn't forgotten that he was almost discovered by Lei Wu Bei last time. Within the magnificent jewel hall, he knew that there were at least 3 Shenxians, so how could he dare to be careless? Being cautious was a necessary characteristic of a top assassin. However, the result of the spirit senses probing had greatly surprised June Xia. Since when did the magnificent jewel hall have so many experts? This was quite a terrifying strength. June Moxie clearly detected that there were more than one strong spirit sense hovering in all 4 directions of the magnificent jewel hall. Each and every one of them had a cultivation level close to that of Tianxian's. June Moxie carefully perceived that there were actually 7 people. The other 2 who were slightly weaker were presumably Xiao Han and Mu Shuetong. Since when did the peak of Tianxian's cultivation level become so rampant? Or could it be that reinforcements have arrived from the Silver Blizzard City? And in the middle, there were several powerful spirit senses. It should be Shenxian's cultivation level, and even one of them, in June Moxie's perception, was not inferior to the solitary eagles. That was an existence close to the Great Master level. Chapter 295. 6 Shenxian Peak, 7 Tianxian Peak, and 2 Tianxian Intermediate. This was a terrifying force for the Tianxiang city at the moment. Why did the Silver Blizzard City send such a group of experts? June Moxie didn't need to use his butt to figure out the answer to this question. If it wasn't for the June family, then who else could it be for? The reason why so many people had been dispatched was naturally because of one of the 8 great masters, Solitary Eagle, who was stationed at the June family's residence. If this force was coordinated well, then they might even have the strength to kill Solitary Eagle. June Xia carefully controlled the Yinyang escape. Then, he drilled into the middle of the large room, and quietly hid himself. His main goal now was not simply to seize the treasures. He needed to know the true intentions of these people, and the true intentions of the Silver Blizzard City. Then, he needed to quickly formulate a countermeasure to eliminate the enemy's strength. Otherwise, the consequences of this situation would be very worrying. Who would have thought that a moment of greed would lead to such an important piece of information? June Moxie sighed from underground. It's better for people to be a little greedy. See, isn't this a good thing? Isn't this the legendary meat pie that fell from the sky? The heavens still favor the good, and this young master has done a lot of good deeds. I've punished the evil, done good deeds, built bridges, paved roads, and blessed the people. I haven't had the time to do those things yet, but if this young master wasn't a good person, then why would the heavens favor this young master? Humph. Why? Do you want that damned cripple to continue being so arrogant? I think it's better to take this opportunity to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. A long night is fraught with dreams. It wasn't clear what was being said, but an indignant voice rang out. It sounded very unreconciled. The one who had spoken was Xiao Han. Impudent. Our actions are the result of the Silver Blizzard City's collective research. When did you have the right to question us? You don't even know your place. A feminine voice scolded. If it wasn't for you stubbornly going your own way back then and fanning the flames everywhere, would there be such chaos now? If the Dongfang family hadn't come out of nowhere to rob and kill us during the incident in the Silver City, which aroused the public's anger and diverted their attention, I'm afraid that the Supreme Covenant would have intervened because of your nonsense. Now, do you still want to destroy the Silver City? How can a mere June family destroy the Silver Blizzard City? Grandpa, how can you blame me for messing around? This was the hatred of stealing his wife. It was as irreconcilable as the murder of one's father. Let me ask you, which man in this world could swallow this insult? Xiao Han's voice was very agitated. Grandpa. Xiao Han's grandfather. Wouldn't that be the highest-ranking person in the Xiao family in Blizzard Silver City? Is this Xiao Xingyun or Xiao Buyu? Jun Moxie held his breath and continued to eavesdrop without moving. He heard every single sound, big or small, in his ears. But, you've already killed 4 people of the Jun family. And, they were the backbone of the family. Jun Wui has also been crippled because of you, you evil creature. What more do you want? Do you really want to leave no one alive? The feminine voice seemed to be hating iron for not becoming steel. Besides, what kind of situation are we in now? The Shuihan Manor and Shi Changshao have issued a supreme summoning order. How can that be a trivial matter? We also have to rush to the southern region. So, how can we be delayed because of a trivial grievance like you? And, how can we stir up trouble at such a critical juncture? One couldn't help but admit that this person's manner of speaking and handling was quite magnanimous. At least, he wasn't as unbearable as Xiao Han. Speaking of this matter, I thought of another matter. The two are somewhat related. So, I asked Grandpa to participate in this. Xiao Han's spirit seemed to be roused. I received a note when I was about to leave the Imperial Palace. There was only a brief message on it. Jun Wui will be leading the army to the south to deal with the Xian beast tide. Grandpa, it would be better if we... What's the use of sending ordinary soldiers to deal with the Xian beast tide in the south? The feminine voice suddenly paused. It seemed as if it had pondered for a moment. Then, it continued, that's right. This might be an opportunity if that's the case, second brother, this note of unknown origin is indeed an opportunity. But, second brother, please don't forget that Solitary Eagle will also be heading to the south once the Supreme Summoning Order is issued. And, he will certainly be traveling together with Jun Wui if he goes. So, it won't be easy to deal with Jun Wui with Solitary Eagle around. Therefore, the crux of the matter is that the Solitary Falcon is the core of the problem. Second brother. It seems that the second most important person of the Xiao family is Xiao Buyu. That's right. That old Solitary Eagle must pay the price since he wants to stick his neck out. How can we not take revenge for our sixth brother? Xiao Buyu's feminine voice was brimming with murderous aura. We'll act according to the circumstances when we reach the south. First, we'll concentrate the strength of the 6 of us and the 7 swords. Then, we'll besiege and kill Solitary Eagle. Then, we'll decide whether or not we'll deal with Jun Wui. Everything will be under our control as long as Solitary Eagle isn't there. Moreover, we can just push the blame onto the Xian beasts in that kind of place. And, everything will be over. Second brother, Do you mean to let them go for the time being? Then, we'll deal with them when we reach the south? An old voice asked. June Moxie could tell that it was the voice of the third elder. That's right. The supreme summoning order has already been issued. I'm afraid that the other great masters will launch an attack on the Silver Blizzard City if we continue to fight each other before we reach the south. And, we'll challenge the great masters. So, we can only deal with them when we reach the south, Xiao Buyu spoke in a gloomy manner. Moreover, there's also that mysterious black-clothed masked man. Xiao Buyu's voice became even gentler. He disregarded his status to snatch our Xiao family's soul-replenishing jade. So, that means that it's extremely important to him. He'll come to snatch it again if he finds out that it's on Feng Wu's body. The reason why I've left Feng Wu alone in this room is to make things more convenient for him. He smiled gloomily and said, that mysterious man's abilities will inevitably lead to casualties if he tries to snatch it. So, he won't have to waste any effort to snatch it now that it's on Feng Wu's body. So, he won't cause any trouble. I've already placed a restriction on it. Moreover, I've also added the 1,000 miles soul-locking incense. Xiang's son is also on standby. We'll be able to find him even if he goes to the ends of the earth as long as we have it in our hands. He won't be able to escape. So, we must concentrate all our strength once we've identified our target. And, we must kill him in one fell swoop at all costs. Take back the soul-replenishing jade. Second brother is wise, everyone said in unison. It was clear that everyone's spirits had been roused. Only June Moxie was left stunned. Is there such a good thing? Give it up. It had to be said that Xiao Buyu's trick would be effective against anyone in this world. In fact, even Yun Bichen would be able to find some clues if he were to get his hands on it. But this trick was useless against June Moxie. It's like using a honey trap on a eunuch. This analogy is somewhat inelegant. But the principle is the same. Suddenly, the elders were startled. Second brother, you can already use a restriction on your spiritual sense? Doesn't that mean you've already reached the 4th level of Xinxian? He. Xiao Buyu's laughter contained a sense of complacency. I'm ashamed. I've been in seclusion for 10 years, but I've finally made this step forward. This is also the reason why I'm confident that I'll be able to capture that mysterious man. Congratulations to second brother for making such great progress. Everyone said in unison. However, June Moxie snickered in his heart. Confidence? Are you talking about confidence in front of this young master? This young master will treat your spiritual sense restriction and your 1,000 kilometers soul-locking incense as nothing more than a fart. Well, no one is allowed to leak any information if we succeed in dealing with the June family this time. Do you understand? Xiao Buyu's eyes radiated power in all directions as he spoke in a serious manner. Of course. Otherwise, the lord of the city will blame us. And, no one will feel good about it. Moreover, the June family has the backing of the Dongfang family. So, everything will have to be done in secret. Everyone chuckled and started to discuss other things. June Dashao was very angry at this moment. This Xiao family is very vicious. I want to see who will be exterminated during this trip to the southern heaven city. Not even the chickens and dogs will be spared. Second brother, it seems that this Xian beast tide is extraordinary. Could it be that the king-level experts of Tian Fa have intervened? Otherwise, how could there be such a big movement? Now that the Supreme Medallion has been issued, second brother, do you think any of the 8 great supremes will go? It was the 9th elder's voice. It's not difficult to determine. The first great master Yun Bichen hasn't appeared in the world for many years. So, I'm afraid that he won't be an exception this time. Moreover, the blue great master Meng Hongchen is too far away from the southern heaven city. So, I'm sure that she won't go even if she receives the news. But the cold-blooded master Lei Wu Bei and solitary eagle will certainly go. After all, they're in the Tianxiang city. So, they can't run away even if they want to. The great master of life and death, Shi Changshao, is already at the Shuihan Manor. Li Ju Tian won't disregard his own safety. So, he will certainly return to the manor. Based on a rough calculation, 4 of the 8 supreme martial artists had already arrived. Moreover, we will be going to the Silver Blizzard City on behalf of the City Lord. Moreover, I'm afraid that our overall strength will be the strongest among them. The Great Master Wen Tian is the only one who can't be sure. So, he may or may not go. However, the tyrannical strength that we have gathered should be enough to deal with this Shen beast tide even if he doesn't go. Xiao Buyu smiled slightly. He seemed very confident. But, this Shen beast tide is very strange. I've heard that they attacked the Shuihan Manor as soon as they arrived. Second brother, I don't remember Tian Fa and the Shuihan Manor having any conflict. The third elder frowned. There must be a reason why the Shen beasts have come out of Tian Fa. So, there must be a reason why they attacked the Shuihan Manor. We'll know the reason when we get there. Xiao Buyu closed his eyes. It seemed that he didn't wish to speak anymore. Everyone became silent. These people were naturally confused about the reason behind the Shen beast tide. However, Jun Imo Xia had already guessed the gist of it from underground. Jun Moxie couldn't help but smile bitterly. I'm afraid that this Shen beast tide has something to do with me if my guess is correct. Chapter 296. Jun Moxie remembered that he had negotiated with Long Crane and Bear Mountain to harass the Shuihan Manor, and to break the legs of the young master of the Shuihan Manor. Then, he would help them break through their bottlenecks as long as they accomplished this goal and returned to the Tianxiang city. This would be their reward for delaying the Shuihan Manor. They had agreed to a time limit of half a month, but Jun Moxie had extended the time limit to 1 month. He had thought that they would have accomplished this task by now since they had made it sound so easy. But, there had been no news until now. And, Jun Moxie had found it strange. But now, the sudden outbreak of the Shen beast tide was caused by these 2 fellows. Who else could it be? But, I had only asked them to delay the Shuihan Manor. I didn't ask them to deal with the entire world's Shen experts. What was going on now that they had created such a huge commotion? Jun Moxie was puzzled as he thought about this. Those 2 should have known about the stakes in this matter. But, why were they so unwise? Is there really another reason? Jun Imo Xia obviously didn't know that even the 2 Shen beast kings who had rushed to the southern heaven city in high spirits were extremely gloomy about this matter. Man proposes, but God disposes. Dealing with the Shuihan Manor without Master Ju Tian's protection was a trivial matter for these 2 Shen beasts. Moreover, they didn't need to confront the Shuihan Manor directly. They only needed to harass the Shuihan Manor on a small scale. However, the 2 Shen beast kings hadn't expected that their appearance in the Tianxiang city would arouse the vigilance of the Master of Life and Death, Shi Changshao. Shi Changshao left for the Shuihan Manor in the southern heaven region the same night after the Shen Core competition had ended. How could the Shen beast kings be a trivial matter? After all, the Shuihan Manor was next to the Tian Fa forest. The Shen beast kings of Tian Fa had left the forest. So, the Shuihan Manor shouldn't be unaware of such a big matter. Coincidentally, the great master Li Ju Tian had returned to the Shuihan Manor at the same time. He was tired from his travels, and wanted to return home. Everything that should have happened, and everything that shouldn't have happened, at this specific time, happened with great vigor. The 2 Shen beast kings, Long Crane and Bear Mountain, had arrived at the Shuihan Manor in a very ostentatious manner. Then, they had arrogantly kicked open the manor's gate, and had vigorously carried out Jun Moxie's policy of stirring up trouble. First, they had wantonly burned, smashed, and looted everything. Then, they had thrown the entire Shuihan Manor into chaos. Call your young lord out, let me break that brat's legs, then I'll leave immediately. How could the Shuihan Manor agree to such conditions? As the saying goes, if the master is humiliated, the subject must die. The 2 Shen beasts' cultivation was close to that of a great master, and their bodies were even stronger than that of a great master. But the Shui Han Manor also had more than 10 Shenxians and dozens of Tian Xians. So, both sides had started to fight because of a disagreement. A great master was a great master, and a beast king was a beast king. Long Crane and Bear Mountain were like tigers in a flock of sheep. They were fighting in high spirits, and hadn't fallen into a disadvantageous position. Moreover, they weren't like the 8 great masters. They didn't care about their status as masters, and they didn't have any misgivings. In fact, they had taken advantage of the chaos, and had started to rampage through the Shui Han Manor. They had pushed down walls in the east, and set fire to the west. This had made the Shui Han Manor's Shenxians extremely angry. But, they had been unable to do anything about it. They had only been able to deal with the Shui Han Manor in a group fight. The 2 Xian beast kings had been wreaking havoc, and had been very happy. But, their joy had turned to sorrow. First, the great master of life and death, Shi Changshao, had arrived at the most chaotic moment. Shi Changshao had naturally chosen to stand on the side of the Shui Han Manor when he had seen this chaotic situation. So, he had joined the fray without demur, and had resisted Bear Mountain by himself. The rest of the Shui Han Manor's men had been left to deal with Long Crane. And, the situation had been reversed with the help of a great master. Therefore, Long Crane and Bear Mountain had fallen into a disadvantageous position. Their mission would have been considered complete if they had chosen to retreat at this time. But, they were Xian beast kings. So, how could they lose face like this? How would they have the face to look for that mysterious master to break through the bottleneck if they had given up after being beaten by him? Moreover, he hadn't even done what he had asked for. He had only knocked down a few houses. How could that be considered as causing trouble? Moreover, he had specifically stated that he had asked for Li Tingyun's legs to be broken. But, we haven't even seen his shadow yet. How could that mysterious master be so easily fooled? It had to be said that these 2 Xian beast kings were very honest. They had been entrusted with a task, and were very loyal to it. Isn't it just Shi Changshao? Let's fight again tomorrow if we can't beat him today. Then, let's see who can last longer. Don't tell me that you humans are more resilient than us Xian beasts. This is outrageous. After all, the 2 of them had thick skin and thick flesh. So, they didn't care about the attacks of those below the great master level. So, they continued to fight fiercely even when they were besieged. In fact, they seemed to be getting more and more courageous as they fought. In fact, they had managed to kill several people in a short time. Then, the 2 Xian beasts didn't have the demeanor of an expert. They left Shi Changshao alone, and continued to wreak havoc in a frenzied manner. Then, they didn't wait for the people to catch their breath, and continued to cause trouble the next morning. In fact, it seemed as if they wouldn't stop until they had achieved their goal. These 2 Xian beasts had the demeanor of a very persistent person. Their persistence had caused the entire Shui Han Manor to complain incessantly. It's not that there aren't any experts. In fact, there are many experts like Shenxian. But, the gatekeeper can't always be Shenxian, right? These 2 Xian beasts were super experts. So, even an immortal wouldn't be able to guard against them. Many people could fight these 2 beasts one-on-one. But, they didn't have the ability to keep them here. So, there was no need to talk about killing them. The experts were getting more and more tired. But, the 2 Xian beasts were getting more and more excited. They felt that these few days were the most exhilarating days of their lives. However, a tragedy happened at this time. Li Ju Tian had returned. One could imagine how furious the second most powerful great master in the world was. I haven't been home for a few years. But, my home is now being attacked. Moreover, the Shui Han Manor is in a state of chaos within a 300-kilometer radius. Smoke is rising everywhere. Everything has collapsed. Is this still the Shui Han Manor? Is this still the place I've painstakingly built over my lifetime? It's like a refugee camp. Li Ju Tian attacked in anger, and nearly killed the 2 Xian beast kings on the spot. The 2 Xian beasts were formidable, but it depended on who they were up against. They might be able to fight against Shi Shao, but they weren't a match for the second great master, Li Ju Tian. Moreover, they had played too much. So, they were like an arrow at the end of its flight. They were exhausted, and no longer in peak condition. Fortunately, the two Xian beasts had intrepid bodies. So, they were barely able to contend with Li Ju Tian for a while. The two Xian beasts were seriously injured, and the Shuihun Manor was victorious. Li Ju Tian had spent half of his life building the Shuihun Manor. But, many of the Tian Xian and Shen Xian experts had been injured by the two Xian beasts. Li Ju Tian had defeated the two Xian beasts. But, he hadn't been able to kill either of them. So, it could be said that it was a Pyrrhic victory at best. However, the old manor lord had returned. The great master of life and death had come to visit. Moreover, he had defeated the two Xian beast kings. This was a cause for celebration. But, something unexpected happened when the banquet was being held that night. Without any warning, Xian beasts as far as the eye could see directly rushed over. There were low-level Xian beasts, middle-level Xian beasts, and even higher Xian beasts. There was nothing they couldn't have imagined. The most frightening thing was that the pack of Xian beasts had come in tens of thousands of them. They were like a surging wave. The Shuihun Manor had just dealt with the wolves. But they had suffered even more losses. The Xian beasts had retreated without a trace. How lucky! Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Then, they saw the Tian Fa forest specialties, the gold Xian man-eating ants, rolling towards them. It wasn't luck, but misfortune. But, this wasn't the end. Not only did they have to deal with the man-eating ants, but they also had to deal with the attacks of the flying Xian beasts. It was said that the Shuihun Manor had been in complete darkness for 2 days. Two great Xian beast kings had suffered a loss. How could this be? This had directly triggered a Xian beast tide. This time, it wasn't just to fulfill the promise with that mysterious expert. It was a matter of face and hatred. The dignified Xian beast kings had been beaten to the point of running away with their tails between their legs. How could they lead the Xian beasts if they couldn't get back at them? Moreover, the most outrageous thing was that the experts behind Li Ju Tian had cheered and applauded when he had repelled the two Xian beasts. They had been bullied by the two Xian beasts for the past few days. So, it was only natural that they would say something unpleasant when they saw the two Xian beasts suffer defeat. In fact, the two Xian beasts hadn't been killed on the spot by Li Ju Tian. Therefore, the two Xian beast kings had become furious. Their hair had stood up in anger. Moreover, the Tian Fa forest had experienced a small change recently. And, this had made the two Xian beasts even more unscrupulous. There was a saying that goes, when the tiger is gone, the monkey becomes the king. So, wouldn't they be able to do anything without restraints? Moreover, how could they deal with great master Li Ju Tian if they didn't do something big? Therefore, the Xian beasts had recklessly rolled up like a hurricane, and had crazily engulfed everything. Li Ju Tian's methods had reached the heavens. But, he was only one person. So, he had been forced to retreat again and again. However, the two Xian beast kings didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. They were blindly unwilling to let the Xian beasts off. In fact, it seemed as if they were going to kill them all. The two Xian beast kings were also having difficulties in their hearts. Big brother, quickly hand over your son. We will break his legs and retreat immediately. How can you be so untactful? We won't break his legs. We will only break his legs. He will be fine after 2 days. In any case, let us go through the motions, right? Damn! Such a simple matter can force us to retreat. But these old fellows insist on fighting to the death. Chapter 297. However, what kind of person was Li Ju Tian? He was the second most powerful great master in the world, second only to Yun Bichen. How would he be able to survive if he were to hand over his son in such a situation? Therefore, it wasn't as if the two sides hadn't tried to negotiate. But, every time they tried to negotiate, it would collapse in an instant. The fight between the two sides was getting more and more intense. The Shuehan manor eventually couldn't afford to continue fighting. They would be completely annihilated, and become food for the Xian beasts. Therefore, Li Ju Tian and Shi Changshao had no choice but to issue a great master summon for help. And after that, it was the situation that Jun Imo Xia and the rest knew about. This matter had become very big. Moreover, everyone was confused, and didn't know why such a thing had happened. Even the two great dark beast kings that had caused the trouble were bewildered. That man wants us to deal with the Shuehan manor. Why? I don't know. They weren't the only ones who were depressed by this question. Li Ju Tian and the Shuehan manor were even more depressed and angry. Who did we provoke? How did such a disaster suddenly befall us? What kind of person was behind all of this? Wasn't all of this too strange? Li Ju Tian had asked Long Crane and Bear Mountain many times, why? We've been living in harmony for so many years, and we've even done business with each other. But now, you've come to kill us without saying anything. Even if you want to go to war with my Shuehan manor, you must at least give us a reason, right? Li Ju Tian's request wasn't excessive. In fact, it was very reasonable. There must be a reason for the two countries to go to war, right? The two Xian beasts were always left speechless at this time. We're in the wrong. Can we say that we lost a bet, and that man doesn't like your Shuehan manor? So, we came here. We only wanted to break your son's leg, that's all. Wouldn't that be a loss of face? It's as if our brothers have been reduced to someone else's thugs. We're also famous, and we can command great people. The two beasts hemmed and hawed. In the end, when they were pressed, Bear Mountain's temper flared up. Damn it, aren't you just the second supreme being? You actually dare to interrogate us? Who do you think you are? Li Ju Tian didn't ask any more questions after Bear Shan Shan had spoken those words. However, both sides had fought even more fiercely than before. Li Ju Tian would have followed the Xian beasts into the Tian Fa forest even if they wanted to retreat. He was about to explode from anger. This was because Big Bear had said a rather classic line, "No reason, I just don't like the look of you. Look at your Shuehan manor's face. Didn't you use your numbers to bully us that day? We're going to bully you because we have more beasts today. What's wrong with that? Even if you don't feel embarrassed, as a neighbor, I still feel embarrassed. So I want to teach you a lesson." Li Ju Tian was a 100-year-old second-great master, so much so that he almost vomited blood. The fight between the two sides had escalated after these words had been spoken. Li Ju Tian had also brazenly issued the great master's summons after these words had been spoken. Both sides had reached a point where they wouldn't rest until one of them was dead. Therefore, thousands of people and Xian beasts had gathered together, and started to fight to the death. It had even directly led to the current situation where there was a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, forming a grudge that could not be resolved. However, no one knew the truth. Even the cause of this incident, young Master Jun Imo Xia, was also confused. In fact, he was completely flabbergasted. I only wanted you to cause some destruction, okay? I didn't ask you to start a world war. You can't blame me for this dispute. I didn't mean it. I'm innocent. Of course, Li Ju Tian would have vomited blood if he knew that the Shuehan manor that he had painstakingly built for his entire life had almost been destroyed because his precious son had wanted to take a concubine. What was a femme fatale? This phrase, in a situation where no one knew about it, had been created using the corpses of countless profound beasts and the blood of countless experts. Under a situation where tens of thousands of people were silently searching for the truth, it was the most authentic and authoritative interpretation. From ancient times until now, there had been many legends of femme fatale. But there had never been a femme fatale who had brought such a calamity to the martial world. In fact, even the Xian beasts had been harmed. Guan Qinghan, the young madam of the Jun family, had set a precedent. Not only was this unprecedented, but it would also be unrepeatable. The young lady of the Jun family, Guan Qinghan, could be said to be the most beautiful woman in the universe if one were to judge her from this point alone. Of course, this beauty had one thing in common with all the other beauties of the past: she was innocent. In fact, she was even more innocent than them. And that's because Guan Qinghan didn't know about this matter. She was thousands of miles away in the capital, grieving for Qiu Lianyu. How could she have known that she was thousands of miles away? In fact, this whole matter was an unsolved case. Just like now, in the room above the ground of the magnificent Jewel Hall, the 6 great masters, Shen Xian, were aimlessly guessing. And, underground, Jun Dashao was also frowning in deep thought. What was the purpose of this Xian beast tide? Why did it have to be so big? It really took a lot of thinking. Jun Moxie stood quietly on the ground, thinking back and forth several times. He felt that there was something wrong with this matter. There must have been some changes that went beyond his original estimation. Finally, he made a decision. What does this Xian beast tide have to do with me? This Xian beast tide is a good thing for me. Besides, even if I really wanted to go to the Tianfa forest, it would be to hunt for treasures. Whoever wants to stop the Xian beast tide can go. I don't have the time to do that. Also, those old guys on the ground are really too hateful. They are actually scheming to deal with the third uncle and the Jun family. They even want to destroy my Jun family in one fell swoop. This is really intolerable. Then, Jun Dashao silently drilled out of the ground. He was still in a stealthy state. This was the mystery of the yin-yang escape technique. Even a very high-level expert would find it difficult to find him. Lei Wubei had noticed some clues about Jun Dashao. But, Great Master Lei hadn't been able to find him. Jun Dashao was surprised by the keen senses of a great master. But, he was also very confident in his own yin-yang escape technique. Even a great master couldn't find him. So, how could a small fry like him be able to? Xiao Fengwu wasn't in the room where everyone was having a secret meeting. Perhaps his status wasn't enough to participate in such a high-level meeting. However, Jun Moxie hadn't forgotten his main purpose for coming here. Even the Hongjun Pagoda has a reaction. Ah, the Xiao family's soul-replenishing jade? This name is very hard to pronounce. Jun Moxie cursed in his heart. The corners of his mouth crooked. Xiao Buyu's divine sense restriction. 1,000-mile soul-locking incense. Humph. I'll put it in the Hongjun Pagoda once I get it. I'm afraid that even a great principal's divine sense restriction won't be of any help, right? As for that bullshit 1,000-mile soul-locking incense, it doesn't matter how awesome it is. But, it can't chase into my consciousness, can it? Isn't this the so-called "the devil rises 10 times as the righteous rises 1 foot"? I'm better than you if you're better. The Xiao family's elders had isolated Xiao Fengwu in a room with good intentions. And, they were waiting for me to steal it. They were cooperating with me in this way. Wasn't this tantamount to giving it to me with both hands? How could I disappoint such good intentions? How could I not accept them with a smile? Jun Moxie would feel guilty if he were to disappoint the second elder Xiao Buyu's good intentions. The second elder of the Xiao family was not only magnanimous, and generous. Therefore, Jun Moxie began to search every room in high spirits in order to find the hidden treasure. So, it shouldn't be difficult to find it since they've deliberately planned for me to steal it. Jun Moxie calmed himself down, and carefully probed the various powerful divine senses in the room. And, he discovered something in common. Almost everyone had dispersed their spiritual powers. Some were strong, and some were weak. And, they were monitoring the secret room in the middle of the room. So, it would be impossible for anyone to escape unscathed if they were to break into the room under the cover of so many spiritual powers. Jun Moxie smiled mischievously in his heart. He wasn't the slightest bit afraid. So, he stealthily moved towards the secret room. Fu *K. Do you think you're a great master? Do you think you can monitor it with your divine senses? Are you thinking too highly of yourselves? Or are you looking down on me? Everything was as he had expected. Xiao Fengwu's face was still pale. He was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the room. His eyes were closed, and his hands were placed in front of his chest. He was holding a jade pendant. That jade pendant was the object of Jun Dashao's trip. It was the soul-replenishing jade. This jade pendant was genuine. It wasn't adulterated. Jun Moxie could even feel that the jade pendant contained an enormous amount of pure energy. It was slowly being extracted from the pendant as Xiao Fengwu breathed and circulated his Xian Qi. Then, it slowly transformed into Xian Qi that could be absorbed. Then, it seeped into Xiao Fengwu's meridians. Xiao Fengwu's complexion would improve a little after every 2 cycles of Xian Qi circulation. So, this is how the Xiao family uses the soul-replenishing jade. Jun Moxie suddenly understood. Jun Dashao could clearly feel that the pure energy was slowly being transferred into Xiao Fengwu's body. Xiao Fengwu's absorption was only a drop in the ocean compared to the enormous amount of energy contained in the jade pendant. However, Jun Dashao still felt distressed. How could a bastard like him, a lowly plaything of the Xiao family, be worthy of enjoying such a high-grade item? This behavior is a reckless waste of a heavenly treasure. It's worthy of the wrath of the heavens and the resentment of the people. Only I, this young master, can be regarded as appropriate. It's worth it. It's a perfect combination. Therefore, Jun Moxie didn't hesitate. His body quickly floated over. His right hand formed the shape of an eagle's claw. Then, he floated over to grab the jade pendant. It was as fast as lightning. Chapter 298. Xiao Fengwu was wholeheartedly absorbing the pure energy from the jade pendant in order to repair his damaged meridians. He knew that he was being used as bait, so it would be a lie to say that he wasn't afraid. He was also afraid that the mysterious man would come too early. Even if he disdained to kill him, he wouldn't be able to fully recover from his injuries. Then, he would have to suffer for a few more days. Therefore, he worked very hard, wholeheartedly absorbing the pure energy that came from the jade pendant. He could clearly feel that his damaged meridians were slowly wrapped by the pure energy transmitted from the jade pendant. It was as if his whole body was soaked in warm spring water. He only felt that his whole body was warm and extremely comfortable, and his damaged meridians were also recovering at an abnormally rapid speed. He only felt that his spirit was floating, as if ascending to heaven, like an immortal, like a dream, like an intoxicated person. Just when he was feeling the most comfortable, his hands suddenly shook, and the jade pendant disappeared in an instant. Xiao Fengwu was shocked. He hastily opened his eyes and saw that the jade pendant was floating in front of his chest. It paused for a moment and then quickly flew away. What was even more bizarre was that Xiao Fengwu didn't sense anyone's shadow or aura. It was as if the jade pendant had suddenly grown a pair of legs and had a life of its own. How could such a thing happen? What's going on? This definitely wasn't the work of an expert who used profound Xian Qi to guide the jade pendant. First, it wasn't necessary. Second, there wasn't any Xian Qi fluctuation. Xiao Fengwu could tell the difference between the two. So, what was going on in front of him? Xiao Fengwu's consciousness blurred. He almost thought that he was dreaming. He shook his head forcefully to clear his head. Seeing that the jade pendant was about to float out of the door, he thought of the mystical effects of the jade pendant and was very reluctant to let it go. Finally, he mustered up his courage and threw himself forward. At the same time, he screamed, "Help, the jade pendant has escaped, the jade pendant has escaped." Jun Xia, who was in the void, was so amused by this sentence that he almost burst out laughing and gave himself away. Damn it! This brat is too talented. Although this jade pendant was indeed a miraculous treasure, in the end, it was still an inanimate object. For it to be described as escaping, it was truly speechless. However, Xiao Fengwu was in a hurry, and he couldn't clearly explain what had happened in front of him. He wanted to say that it had been stolen, but he clearly hadn't seen anyone do anything. In fact, he hadn't even seen the shadow of a ghost. Therefore, Xiao Fengwu could only shout, "The jade pendant has escaped." However, he didn't realize how ridiculous it sounded when he said it. Even though it was a very fitting way of saying it given the current situation. Someone is here to snatch the soul-replenishing jade. June Moxie grabbed the jade pendant, and it fell from Xiao Fengwu's hand. Xiao Buyu's white eyebrows twitched as he stood up from the other room. He had placed a restriction on his spirit sense, and had transmitted this information to his mind. Then, a small green-feathered falcon flew out of Xiao Buyu's bosom, and flew toward Xiao Fengwu's room. It could be said that this outcome was within his expectations. But, it wasn't reasonable at the same time. The third elder had described the tyrannical strength of this mysterious man. He had disregarded his status to take away a younger generation's treasure. So, he wouldn't have let go of the other half of the jade pendant. In fact, he was determined to get his hands on it. However, this secret room had been shrouded in the spirit sense of so many experts. Even the first great master Yun Bichen wouldn't have been able to break through such a formidable defensive power. So, it was likely that a normal person wouldn't have been able to enter this room without alerting the spirit sense of the guardians. However, this mysterious man had managed to sneak in without making a sound. Such a method could be said to be a rare and extraordinary skill. Xiao Buyu's thin body floated up like a white cloud in the next moment, and flew out as light as a feather. He flew towards the secret room where Xiao Fengwu was recuperating. At the same time, an extremely feminine yet exceptionally sharp long whistle was issued from his mouth. The sound wasn't loud, but it was unceasing. The entire magnificent jewel hall was instantly alarmed by this long whistle. The speed of a spirit Xian expert was extremely fast. Almost in an instant, a total of 12 peak experts had surrounded the room where Xiao Fengwu was recuperating from his injuries. Everyone was completely focused and alert, ready to act at any time. An expert who could sneak into a secret room and steal a treasure while being shrouded by so many spirit senses couldn't be an easy opponent. This was the consensus of everyone present. This man is a great enemy. Xiao Buyu's clear voice hadn't yet finished. His eyes flashed with a murderous intention as he rushed toward Xiao Fengwu's recuperating room. He was about 7 feet away from the door when the hard and thick red sandalwood door was attacked by his Xian Qi. In fact, it had silently turned into fragments and disappeared in the air. Xiao Buyu's body moved like a dragon as he entered the room with lightning speed. This was Xiao Buyu's wishful thinking. Everyone would attack as soon as there was an anomaly. However, there was no need for everyone to barge into the room. After all, the situation would become chaotic, and the enemy would be able to escape. He would only need the strongest person to rush in alone. Then, the others would form a huge encirclement around the room. They would closely monitor the situation, and block off any possible escape route. In fact, they would be met with a head-on attack as soon as that person came out, no matter which direction he went. Everyone on his side would erupt with their full strength as soon as they saw that person. And, they would be able to block him for a little bit. In fact, they would only need to block him for half the time it takes to blink an eye. Then, they would have enough time to surround him and attack him together. Xiao Buyu was confident that even the weakest person on his side would be able to block him for a while. Even the leader of the 8 great masters, Yun Bichen, would be able to block him for a while. Even Yun Bichen wouldn't be able to do so. Xiao Buyu didn't believe that anyone in this world would be able to escape his line of sight in such a short time. Moreover, there were still 5 Shenxians and the 7 swords of the Silver City outside. That mysterious person might be able to sneak in without a sound. But, it would be a joke to think that he would be able to leave in the face of such a tight blockade. This plan was absolutely flawless. It was foolproof. There would be no mishaps. However, Xiao Buyu hadn't expected it. And, there had been a mishap even if there had been no mishaps. He rushed into Xiao Fengwu's room as fast as he could. Shen Xian's Xian Qi had already been activated. In fact, it seemed as if his entire body had turned into a violent tornado. He had already heard about the terrifying strength of this mysterious person from the rumors. Even though he was fearless, he was still wary of him. According to the description of Brother 3 and Brother 6, he was afraid that if he were to be careless, he might die at the hands of this mysterious person. How could he dare to be careless? His Xian Qi protected his entire body as soon as he entered the room. Then, he spun around with a whoosh sound. He looked like a ballerina performing a very difficult maneuver. But, he didn't find anything. Xiao Fengwu was the only one standing in the room with a blank expression on his face. Where is he? Xiao Buyu shouted in his heart. Could it be that I'm too late? That's impossible, right? The fragrant eagle was also pointing in this direction. How could I be wrong? Who? Xiao Fengwu was at a loss. He didn't know what his great-grandfather was asking. So, he replied in a confused manner. Where's the person who snatched the soul-replenishing jade? Are you stupid? Xiao Buyu was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Damn it! That person had snatched the jade from my hands. And, he's asking me, who is it? Fortunately, Xiao Buyu had cultivated himself well. Otherwise, he would have gone mad with anger. There's no one. Where is there? Xiao Fengwu looked at his hands in a daze. Then, he looked at his furious great-grandfather. He didn't know what was going on. His mind was still in a state of confusion. How did the jade fly away? It's very strange. Did it become a spirit? There's no one. Then, where's the soul-replenishing jade in your hands? Are you going to tell me that it grew wings and flew away? Xiao Buyu was so angry that he couldn't beat it. So, he berated loudly. That's right. Grandfather, that was very strange. The jade didn't have wings. But, it flew away on its own. It's true. Xiao Fengwu's face was serious. Trash. Xiao Buyu cursed loudly. Then, he rushed out with a whooshing sound. His face had turned black with anger. I've seen useless people. I've seen stupid people. But, I've never seen such a waste. Such a waste is my own great-grandson, but... I'm telling the truth, the jade pendant flew away on its own. It didn't have wings. So, it flew away very quickly. Xiao Fengwu was mumbling behind Xiao Buyu's back. He felt that he had been wronged. However, Xiao Fengwu felt wronged. Why doesn't anyone believe the truth these days? I've seen it with my own eyes. And, I've experienced it myself. Screw your grandmother. Shut the fuck up, you bastard. A furious curse was heard in midair. Then, a palm wind that was so dense that it seemed to have condensed into a tangible substance flew down and hit Xiao Fengwu's face. Xiao Fengwu staggered and fell to the ground. His face immediately became swollen. Xiao Fengwu was extremely aggrieved as he covered his face. But, he was thinking in his heart, you motherfucker. You found the right person. Damn it. My grandfather wouldn't even exist in this world if you hadn't. Xiao Buyu's body leapt up into the sky like a meteor. He soared to a height of 30 meters above the magnificent Jewel Hall's pavilion. Then, he hovered in the air. His body rotated in a circle, and his eyes swept in all directions. Everything within a 10-kilometer radius could be seen under the dazzling starlight. But, he couldn't find any clues. That man had left just as silently as he had arrived. The small fragrant eagle circled around him. It was clear that even this little thing had lost its target. How is this possible? Let me nag a bit. Sigh, my little brother got into an accident and was hospitalized, so I had to accompany him every night. Cough cough, my little brother is the original Fatty Tang in the book, and he has been injured recently, so he can't take care of himself. Ah, he has 3 urgent needs, so I have to carry him to the hospital, untie him, take off his clothes, carry him, and carry him back. Can you imagine how miserable I am right now? I've been working in the hospital for the last half of the night. Many people in the group know about this. I didn't want to talk about it because I didn't want everyone to worry. But, more and more people are coming up with suggestions. Please understand. Also, my computer broke down a few days ago. I've said so much, but I hope you understand. I remember seeing a comment in the book review section some time ago. But, I can't remember which book it was. The comment said, breaking chapters is like having sex. If there's a first time, there'll be a second time. And, there will always be a variety of reasons in life to break chapters and ask for leave. So, once there's a first break, there will be more and more reasons to ask for leave. And, it will become smoother and smoother. And, the book will either be left unfinished or unfinished. This sentence makes a lot of sense. So, no matter what the reason is, as long as my hands can still write, as long as my brain can still think, I don't want to break chapters. Because I don't want to have such a first time. At this point, everyone understood why I didn't tell them the reason in advance. Because I was afraid that if I told them in advance, I would have a justifiable reason to slack off. If the matter of breaking chapters symbolizes my persistence, then, I hope that I can persist. Even if I'm only completing a minimum daily update. It's nothing more than tiring myself out a little. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.